Hi, good evening. Posting the link to VirtueCast number 4 at VoiChat so people can live stream in if that's what they want to do. Okay, that's done. There's my script. Let me pull up. Good evening. Welcome to VirtueCast number 4. I'm trying to do more popular stuff on the even-numbered ones and more hardcore philological material on the odd-numbered VirtueCasts. As a response to people who were unhappy that they couldn't read my text last time, I've spent a little time fooling around by putting it up on a PowerPoint. Let's see if I can get that PowerPoint to come up now. Plus, window capture. Okay. Which window? The window. Let's try another window capture. Plus, window capture. Yeah, let's do that one. Okay, so what I did is I put Cyberleonatus into a slideshow, and now we're going to go View, Reading View. Cool. So here we have the first slide, Cyberleonatus. Second slide, what is it like for a boy to not have separated from his mother? And we did the Indian Eunuch Festival, and what I'm hoping there is that that type will be available. The parading of the devotees of Cybele in ancient Rome must have been very colorful. So let us begin with some colorful images from the All India Eunuchs Conference at Ajmer in Rajasthan, 18 April 2013. This is straight up cultural appropriation. I don't think uh, the Roman eunuch parade would have looked substantially different. It would have just been people dressed up like eunuchs, that is, dressed up the gender of their choice, together with musical instruments and as much confusing, overexciting noise and chaos as as a Cybele parade has. This is my boy here in the blue shirt. I'm trying to focalize the whole epic through him. He's obviously overwhelmed and confused by the noise, the chaos, the parading, the scents, the colors, the sounds, the fake tits, the lipstick, the long hair. All these men, whether they've cut their genitals off or not, pretending to be women. Blue, red, a lot of magenta, red and gold, blue and orange, green, red. So here we get to the poetry. This rather anxious-looking early adolescent boy in the background of slide number 3 is to be imagined as the hero of Opus Generis. As the hero of Opus Generis, present throughout, he serves the same role in OG as Tiresias in The Wasteland, to focalize and unify the gender epulion, the little epic of gender, by observing and participating in all phases of the gender identity formation process. The aim of Opus Generis, however, is sexual differentiation, as in Matthew Barney's Cremaster cycle, rather than the sexual confusion focalized by Eliot's Tiresias. That's how Eliot says it, Tiresias. As Eliot says in the Notes to the Wasteland, to line 218, Tiresias, although a mere spectator and not indeed a character, is yet the most important personage in the poem, uniting all the rest. Just as the one-eyed merchant, seller of currants, melts into the Phoenician sailor, and the latter is not wholly distinct from Ferdinand, Prince of Naples, so all the women are one woman, and the two sexes meet in Tiresias. What Tiresias sees, in fact, is the substance of the poem. The whole passage from Ovid is of great anthropological interest. Cum iunone joco set maior vestra profectost, quamquae contingit maribus, dixisse voluptas. Illa negat, placuit, quae sit sententia docti, quaerere Tiresiae, venus hic erat utraque nota. They say that Jupiter, bantering with Juno, declared that in comparison to men, women got far greater pleasure from sex. She did not agree. It seemed best to them to inquire what the opinion of the learned Tiresias might be, for to him the operations of Venus were known from both sides. Nam duo magnorum viridi coeuntia silva, corpora serpentum, baculi viola viratictu, deque viro factus mirabile femina septem, egerat autumnos, octavo rursus eostem, weeded. For, catching two serpents in the forest, let's take that in the green forest, their large bodies intertwined in coital union, he struck them with his staff. Transformed out of his masculinity, a marvel to relate, he spent 7 years as a woman, and in the 8th he saw the same serpents again. Vidit et est vestrae si tanta potentia plagae, dixit, ut auctores sorto in contraria mutet, nunc quoque vos feriam, percussis anguibus istem. He saw them and said, if there is such power in striking you, that the striker's fate may be changed to its opposite, in this case his fate to be a woman, once again I will strike you. And when the same two snakes were struck, forma prior rediit, genitivaque venit imago, arbiter hic igitur sumptus te lite jocosa, dicto jovis firmat, gravius Saturnia justo, nec pro materia fertur doluisse suique, judicis aeterna damnavit lumina nocte. His prior masculine form returned, and once more he seemed the giver of seed. This judge then, having taken up the merry dispute, upheld the declaration of Jove, that women have more pleasure in sex. But Saturn's daughter didn't like this. But Saturn's daughter was said to be upset beyond reason or measure, and cursed the judge's eyes with eternal night for his judgment. Ad paterum nipotens, nequenim licet irritacuiqua, facta Dei fecisse Deo, pro lumina dempto, scire futura dedit, poenamque levavit honore. But in return for the loss of his vision, the Almighty Father, for it is not permitted that one God may invalidate the actions of any other, granted Tiresias, rather than Tiresias, Tiresias to know the future, lightening his punishment with this honor. Then I do the Mishima thing, which we'll skip. You can tell it's the same buzzing and blooming confusion of color and sound and mob emotionality that the boy Mishima, when he was a boy, Kimitaki Hiraoka, was not able to understand or appreciate. Catullus 63 now, I gave you a little opening slide. I want people to be aware of the different flows of libido. Cybele and Attis is about two flows of libido going in opposite directions, so they're counterposed to each other. Pulling forward to become a Roman man while he's working out in the gym, that's obviously a flow of libido. Lifting weights every day, that takes some strength. That's to become manly. That's not to be with his mother all the time. That's to become a man and, do war and wear a toga with pride and stand up and make speeches and all the things that Roman boys want to do. Recognition as an athlete, just like we'll see later in Pindar. Attis was certainly recognized as an athlete. Male suitors, this attracted men who like athletic young men, and he had plenty of those. He was very much connected to the Roman fatherland, not enough, but he was very much, a real live nephew of his Uncle Sam. He was very much a patrio mei creatrix, O fatherland that created me, patrio mea genitrix, he says later on. He had before him the prospect of patriarchal mastery as husband and father. He blew it but he had that prospect before him, and that was pulling him forward, and he was almost connected to the male gods of Rome. On the other hand, Attis also had various forces, various flows of libido, pulling him backwards to remaining with the Phrygian mother goddess. The music, the chanting, the ululating, the color, and the chaos, all that unseated his male rational mind. The excited atmosphere of the parade, the fact that other people were castrating themselves at that time, the presence of the castration mythology, that this is what people did when the castration parade was going through town. Hey, everybody, let's go join the castration parade. That was a present and viable mythology that you would do this and you would be with the mother goddess forever. And you had these icons and the priests and the rituals and all that going on, which were representations of the power and presence of the foreign goddess Cybele, and that's set against his state of being almost connected to the male gods of Rome. What you had there was the power and presence of the foreign goddess Cybele, whom the Romans got tired of at a certain point and threw her out. But at various points she was there. She was the happening goddess, and people did sign up and want to go along with her. Then these are the little captions. Attis desires to become a woman and joins the cult of the Phrygian goddess Cybele. So then I've limited myself to 5 or at most 6 lines, and I've done them in 32-point type, which is as large as I could get them on the screen for the PowerPoint. And I've done them in Arial, which is the most legible, and I hope you can read it. And if you can't, there's really nothing more I can do for you. So this is the beginning of Cybele and Attis, and then we'll resume our regularly scheduled non-philological programming. O'er high deep seas in speedy ship his voyage Attis sped, until he trod the Phrygian grove with hurried, eager tread. And as the gloomy tree-shorn stead, the she-god's home, he sought, there, sorely stung with fiery ire and madman's vaguing thought, share he with sharpened flint the freight wherewith his form was fraught. Superalto vectus Attis celeri rote Maria, trugiot nemos citato cupide pede titigit, adiit quopaca silvis redemita locadeae, stimulatus ibi furenti rabiae vagus animis, de vol sitilia acuto sibi pondera silice. All right, so that was just a brief test of the PowerPoint broadcasting system, and I hope that you enjoyed that continued exposure to hardcore, intense philology. All right, so we're going to kill this. Now I have before me the unreadable script. I did post a copy of it at Boy Chat if anybody cares. The unreadable script of what we'll be talking about tonight for about 3 hours. God save us all. Now, let me see if I can put window capture minus. Yes. Okay, so here I am back on screen. Hopefully a more engaging persona now that you know who I am, now that I'm getting more comfortable with the technology. You're getting more comfortable with the goblin core aesthetic, the bald head, the beard, the poorly articulated speech, the rumpled clothes, the general atmosphere of squalor in which I live and from which I broadcast. Other people in this community who have not come out have probably more material stuff spread around them. I've been out as boiler for 20 years, and this is what it gets me. Good evening. Welcome to Virtue Cast number 4, in which we consider various negative responses to opus generis and the Didaskalos persona. Didaskalos and opus generis are rooted in the ideas of performance art, which were current at the UCSD Visual Art Department in the late 1980s when I was there, as discussed by professors like Alan Capro and Eleanor Antin, long since deceased and retired, but you can look them up on their Wikipedia pages. One idea of these renowned UCSD art weirdos that seemed interesting to me was to deploy performance art personae, stunts, and happenings, that was Alan Capro's big word in the 60s, happenings, to illustrate the otherwise invisible fault lines in society. From that perspective, the kaleidoscopic response to Didaskalos and opus generis, whether accepting, disaffected, or hostile and rejecting, by various groups in the USA society, is more what the piece is about than the so-called content, which of course is simply boring old classical poetry recited over and over and over again with no change. Different groups respond differently at different times, and the public response to Didaskalos and opus generis is often different than the private response. And this structure of differences, plus the social and personality changes catalyzed by ancient poetry, which itself never changes, is what I find to be of perpetual interest. This is an even-numbered virtue cast, and so we'll be focusing less on the philology and more on the contemporary Billingsgate. The content of this virtue cast is inspired by the genius work of April Winchell's Sock Puppet Theater. This came out on YouTube around 2012. I thought it was cool. In which April, daughter of Paul Winchell, the voice of Tigger, the Tigger on Winnie the Pooh, got all of her voice actor buddies together, and with sock puppets in place, they read out-of-control comment threads in funny voices. April Winchell's work on sock puppet theater has apparently not survived into 2022, which is very sad. But I refer to it as the starting point for my work with found comedy material. Certainly, sock puppet versions of various outrageous BC threads are in the works also. The link to Sock Puppet Theater is a collection of links to English voiceover wikia. Can't find any of the 2012 material, sadly, but it was hilarious. So what is Didascalos anyways? Didascalos is a mummy. Didascalos is a mummy, nothing but a papier-mâché construction of strips of paper with writing on them, dipped in laundry starch, and wrapped around an empty mail-shaped space as an invisible armature. Didascalos is made of traditional poetry. Mastering traditional poetry is a lot of hard work, both to dust off the ancient philology, and here you can see the array of each shoebox holds 1,000 cards. I got 70 or 80,000 vocabulary cards I'm responsible for. I have to blow the dust off that and have that all the tip of my tongue if I'm going to call myself a traditional philologist. Mastering traditional poetry is a lot of hard work, both to dust off the ancient philology and to stay in shape with both memory and voice for performing it. So when I'm serious about performing, I have to work out. I have to physically work out. I have to work out my voice. I have to work out the memory. I have to practice. I have to rehearse and rehearse and rehearse, and it's all a tremendous hassle. But compared to poetry, trolling is very much easier because trolling is simply a matter of reading people's online writing back to them in funny voices. The word trolling seems to have a lot of negative connotations. To foster awareness of the positive dimensions of trolling, here is a dialectic chain. And if you've listened to me talk about opus generis, you know that I love dialectic chains. The narcissist fades into the performer fades into the troll fades into the rhetoric teacher. So if you want people's attention, you have to offer them interesting content, rather than just talking about your favorite things and your personal problems. That's pure narcissism. You have to give them content. So the narcissist becomes a performer. But the more you perform, the more you realize that people aren't there to hear your content and your feelings. They're there to get access to their own buried emotions. So the performer becomes a troll, that is someone who is bored of his own performing and gracefully recognizes that the audience's content and the audience's feelings are, straight up, no irony, far more interesting than what he has to offer as a performer. So the troll focuses on throwing out material which brings forward the emotions and performance from the audience. Supreme elegance in trolling is achieved when a maximum of audience feelings and performance are brought out with a minimum of effort from the troll. Fourth and last, the troll becomes a teacher of rhetoric. Once the vein is cut open and the crude and unsightly vapors of other people's emotionality starts to pour out, the rhetoric teacher is there to provide models, structure, performing opportunities, and constructive feedback to help the beginning orators say what they have to say in a graceful, engaging way. The rhetorical approach, speaking your piece in the public square and being part of the public debate, is the one human tradition that can best help us preserve our humanity in an age when they want us to be emotionally reactive, easily manipulated, isolated from our fellow human beings, mistrustful, and utterly unable to take and defend a stance for any particular viewpoint. And trolling has a dialectical place in fostering that older, more humanistic culture. So Virtue Cast number 4 will cover negative responses from. I shoehorned 0 in here because I just happened to hear the YouTuber Max Karson make a live stream last night. What you'll get as a warm-up to Virtue Cast number 4 will be my responses to YouTuber Max Karson, Mr. Girl, not a map, but he literally calls himself Mr. Girl, MRGIRL, all lowercase, Mr. Girl, interviewing Bly Rede on his live stream last night. Now, this is Max Karson very much in charge of his live stream. Not in charge of much else, Max Karson, but by God, he is in charge of what is said and what is not said on his live stream. Bly Rede now. Bly Rede is the presumably fake name for a gentleman who has the title of strategy coordinator at Verped. In a later VirtueCast, we'll be comparing the ethos and indeed the persona that flourish in that ethos of these various groups. Your Before You Act, your Verped, Boy Chat, and various other groups that you can find online. But apparently Verped does have a strategy, and it does have a coordinator of that strategy, and the person playing the role of the coordinator of the strategy is Bly Rede. Oh, the fourth was Prostasia. My bad. How could I forget Prostasia? Jeremy Malcolm will make a special guest appearance on this podcast. At least his text will. So the first thing I was going to consider was Schrodinger's TransCat. I'm very fond of Schrodinger's TransCat. I've apparently bothered the hell out of him. He says I'm not allowed to talk about his Dimension Boy Chat on his site, on his YouTube page, but I still am very fond of him. He is an intelligent and creative YouTuber, skeptical about the claims of trans rights activists, and he is a person who can express his AGP feelings in terms of science fiction and video games, which I find very interesting. Number 2, Sick Rose, of whom I'm very fond at Boy Chat, but let's be real, Sick Rose is a girl. Sick Rose, a Boy Chat poster who shares my feelings that boys should not be transed into girls. He and I are both coming from that place of Nietzschean protest, where our mothers dressed us in pink ribbons and short and little girly outfits, and we never really got over it. Damn it, we never really got over it. So he's taking me to task for my ineffective strategy, my inability to reach people via YouTube. So I appreciate his constructive feedback on that, and I will rip him a new asshole in my commentary on that. Number 3, a detailed write-up of the internet war between include the sexologist James Cantor, and we'll cover all this in great historical detail because I am trying to do this for 10, 20, 30 years down the road. A detailed write-up of the internet war, that is to say, of early 2022, between include the sexologist Dr. James Cantor and YouTuber Karen Davis. You're kidding, right? Who is convinced that she can take down all comers by linking their postings with pedophilia advocacy. Karen Davis and the Yerks, that's her community, that's what I call them, is the people who subscribe to the you're kidding right philosophy. Well, we'll do a complete analysis of them when it comes time to it. But those are the 4 things I'm going to talk about. We're going to talk about YouTuber Max Karson interviewing Bly Rede, how well that went, how much better it might have gone. Schrodinger's TransCat, Sick Rose, and then a full-length treatment of YouTuber Karen Davis, consisting mostly of me reading the 85 posts by her and her her flying Yerk monkeys, making fun of Boy Chat. And really, the reason I'm doing this is to help poor Exolancic, who's another YouTuber. Somebody did a caricature of Exolancic. Exolancic thought it made her look like a Jew, and she had a complete meltdown, and she got removed from YouTube. And I really think that's sad. If you're going to get up there in the public square, you have to, like Kikero. Kikero means chickpea. The man had a wart on his nose, and that's what people called him, right? You didn't get Kikero having an emotional meltdown and not going on to become the greatest orator in Roman history. O fortunatam natam me consule Romam. You didn't get Cicero having a meltdown because someone made fun of his nose. And Exolancic, I'm sending this out to her with love and respect and affection. We need to hear more from her. She's doing very good work, but she needs to toughen up. She needs to be able to say, oh, a person said a bad thing about me on the internet. A person did a cartoon about me on the internet. Anyways, and move on and laugh and move on. So I'm trying to model that this is something that happens. You get out there on the internet, you say things, people disagree with you, people don't like you. Anyway, okay, so moving on. You just need to be able to roll with it. So here we go with Mr. Girl's video. I give you the link in the Boy Chat script. I'll also post the entire Boy Chat script below the. Is there any reason I couldn't do this now? Sure, I could do this right now. Okay, so I will do a quick post of this beneath the YouTube, beneath the live stream, which is presumably going on. Why is it not going on? Right. So I'm pulling up a window here. While we wait, I'll just brag about that. I happen to have the $14 to lash out at the Associated Barber School and get my hair and beard trimmed, put a little olive oil in the beard. So that's why that glow just surrounds me now. Um, so we're going to pull up the YouTube of the live stream, and I'm going to post that link below it so that everybody has a chance to pull up the link and follow along with VertureCast number 4 live now. Lash out at the Associated Barber School and get my hair in. Now I'm listening to my own live link at the same time. Now it's not allowing me to do comments. I will say hi in the chat. No one else is in the chat. I am massively depressed. I am crushed that no one is coming in to make snark on my chat, even though I started an hour late, but whatever. Please come in and make snark in my chat. Apparently that's just how things are done these days, and having a massive peanut gallery of hundreds of people making abusive and irrelevant comments in the right-hand margin of your screen, that's just considered to be normal nowadays. And indeed, if I were to stand up and speak publicly, as Mr. Younger did, having 100 screaming internet-trained children making random noises the whole time would just be the norm. Okay, so unfortunately, I'm not being offered the opportunity to put comments, but I will have this posted either at the boy chat or at the or below this YouTube video. Okay, moving back to my script. I've got the note. I've got the outside. Okay. So, on the assumption that you're watching Mr. Girl's video, oh, that's what I was going to do. Sorry, sometimes I get a little blown away by my own technological cleverness. What we have here is a man named Max Karson. Let me give you a little background. Let me give you a little background on Max Karson. Max Karson apparently grew up with a fairly dysfunctional family. He denies that they were Jewish, but he comes across as very Jewish. His mother seems like a real piece of work. She abandoned married life and took up with a woman. When he was 16 years old, the family romance had kind of gotten a bit sour, where she was openly talking about being sexually attracted to him as a 16-year-old boy. He then went to live with his father, thank God. I hope that happens to anybody who's trapped in a relationship like that, has the opportunity to escape that and find decent role models. But if you've got two moms who are lesbians and very liberal lesbians, abusive liberal lesbians who not only like girls but are also apparently into teenage boys, that you can escape from that, because that sounds a little bit disorderly. So Max Karson is much troubled with pedophilia. He makes any number of videos about it. The big thing, he made a reputation for himself, besides a bunch of low-grade Mad Magazine type obnoxious postings all through college, was when Cuties came out a few years ago. He made a positive review of Cuties on Netflix, which is just 11-year-old girls doing the splits over and over again. I don't know. So he made a positive review of that, and he got a reputation as being a pedo. So he's very interested in the phenomenology, and of course in trying to redefine himself, who is not a map, not a pedo, and yet someone who is apparently, from his video, watching Cuties over and over and over again. So I'm seeing some bizarre dynamics here. This is not somebody who knows how to be a boy lover. I mean, or not how to be a girl lover with any degree of grace and elegance. He is actively looking for people to interview on Twitter. I wouldn't recommend being interviewed with him, because what he's looking for is someone to dump his pedo feelings on and then to yell at them about the pedo feelings that he doesn't have because he dumped them on that other person. So Bly Rede, the interviewee here, Bly Rede from Verped, is trying to lay out his Verped line, and of course, because it doesn't deal immediately and directly with Max's very special emotional needs, Max is having none of what Bly Rede is saying, isn't even able to listen to Bly Rede. So what I did was I tried to go back and read through the lines and try to figure out where is Max coming from, based on other videos that he's made and other things that he has brought out about his personal background, and try to think, okay, what would be a situation where Max felt like his personal psychodrama was being understood, was being expressed, and that there was a way forward out of the psychological impasse. I'm sort of defining him as a guy whose current life conundrum, the riddle he has to solve, is that he desperately wants to be a pedo bro among pedo bros, and he also desperately wants to not be a pedo bro among pedo bros. He is not able to really to come to terms with that. So you'll see him swinging both ways and swinging very fast and swinging very hard against poor Bly Rede, who really has no idea what hit him. So, like I say, he is moving in the direction of being what I had hoped that Benjamin Power Watch. Okay, OBS has just successfully reconnected me. To sum up what I was saying, it was a thank you, Rex, for recommending this emotional train wreck to me. It's about 4 hours, well, 2.5 with Reed, and then another hour to sum up. So almost 4 hours total. It's a 4 hours train wreck of an emotional disaster of an interview. But I think we can learn a lot from it, just like I can learn a lot from watching Benjamin Boyce going head to head with James Shoup. James Shoup shows a lot more ugly AGP emotionality than would be appropriate to show in an interview. And Mr. Boyce, the innocent, charming, bathrobe-wearing Benjamin Boyce, got a considerable amount of feedback for allowing Shoup to be Shoup himself throughout the interview. And I have reflected on that. Hansei, as one says in Japanese. Hansei. I've gone back and reflected on that interview and thought, well, how would I do it any better? I'm fairly used to talking to my fellow boy lovers and knowing what their issues are. I was blindsided by Shoup and Shoup's intense AGP. It was like nothing so much as going on a hike in a park in the northwestern corner of Wyoming. What's it called? Yellowstone, I believe, where it's all it's a decaying volcanic area, and at any moment you could put your foot through the crust, and you could put your foot down into a boiling pot of mud, boiling water, and just have your flesh boiled off your bones in a matter of moments. And they lose a couple people every year in Yellowstone because they do this. So my image then is that Boyce wandered off the path at Yellowstone and put his foot down into the boiling mud of the AGP, the dying volcano of emotionality that's going on inside Mr. James Shoup. The male personality never quite exploded out, and so you've got a dying volcano that still has lots of active geothermal activity, and Boyce put his foot in some of that. So that's my image for Mr. Shoup. But here we are with two very well-spoken gentlemen doing their best to communicate. The key difference here is that Bly is openly able to say the P word, and Mr. Max here is not able to turn loose of the P word, nor is he able to to incorporate that as a part of his identity. And so you get you definitely get this. The image I used was not a wolf with its foot in the trap, but an ermine with its tongue stuck to a block of salt. That's sort of what happened to him when he watched Cuties, is he realized that he was the kind of guy who would watch Cuties over and over and over again. And it's obvious to someone with some perspective that Netflix put this show together to push the buttons of guys like this, like a salt block in the northern wilderness. And the ermine then puts the tongue to the salt block to lick the salt, and the ermine's tongue freezes to the salt block. And this is the famous image that Laurence Olivier used for King Oedipus Tyrannos, King Oedipus Rex, who desperately tried to avoid his fate, but I mean, the more he ran and tried to escape his fate of killing his father and marrying his mother, the more he ended up killing his father and marrying his mother. And so what we're seeing here is the play of fate, the tragedy of Max here trying to come to terms with the fact that he is in fact an ermine with his tongue stuck to a block of salt. And of course he wants someone else to be the ermine with the tongue stuck to the block of salt, and he wants to yell at them for foolishly putting their tongue out and touching the block of salt. And he expects Bly to play this role. And of course Bly is just trying to be a flack, just trying to be a Jen Psaki, for the which going back to 2022, which is when we are now. But if you look at this 20 or 30 years later, you might have forgotten that Jen Psaki was the notorious crap-spouting press secretary for President Biden in 2020. Hey, man, 2022. So Bly Rede is trying to be the flack, the Jen Psaki for Verped. And, of course, the boilerplate Verped rhetoric meets the spinning blades of Max and as I say, a 3.5-hour train wreck ensues. So what I did then, okay, so let us see if we can do a screen capture. Lo and behold, there's an actual window capture. Okay. So you can see a little bit less of me, but now you can see a little bit more.
Pretty sure they didn't believe in God.
There's a little bit more of Max. What you're going to be seeing a lot of is this unblinking white eye. It sometimes goes for a minute or two without blinking. It's really quite creepy, but you know, I'm sure my appearance has its detractors as well.
Ghirardelli Intense Dark.
Okay, shit, we have a food commercial.
Rich.
Okay, so we don't get to see Bly. We don't get to see Bly Rede. We just see Max. Let me pull up my comments that I had made for the Mr. Girl video. So my first thing that I found myself wanting to say was laughing out loud, LOL, at strategy coordinator. That would be Bly's position at Verped, strategy coordinator. And I said, where does that leave room for Prostasia to go then for the title of their corresponding position, world domination plot for pedophiles coordinator? I didn't know that Verped had a strategy. I thought that they were just trying to, you know, at least get people to talk about being virtuous, even though they're not. Verped is, how shall I say this in a charming way? I am about equally bemused and unimpressed by all of the extant organization, whether that be Boychat, Verped, Prostasia, or Before You Act. They have different ways of being lame and self-serving, but they're all lame and self-serving. I suppose I like BC the best because it openly is lame and self-serving, whereas the other ones try to come up with different rhetorical strategies. Again, there will be a podcast where we look at all 4 different rhetorical strategies by those 4 groups: Boychat, Verped, Prostasia, and Before You Act. You know, as if there was some moral component to Before You Act. Okay, so Before You Act or Prostasia, I mean, they're going for world domination. Let's just be open about it. They are going for world domination. They've seen the pedo swing. They've seen that momentum. They're going to work with that momentum. Verped claims to be about virtue, but then what exactly is their strategy? Well, Bly's going to tell you, or at least he's going to tell you as much as Jen Psaki is going to tell you what Biden is really up to, Biden and his handlers. Okay, 24 minutes. One of the major things that they got into, see, I don't even remember. I watched this last night, and it was such a nightmare, I've blanked it out. But I have a time code here of 24, so let me see if I can pull that up. All right, there's 23 or so.
The other thing we want to do as well is to educate the public about pedophilia. If we
Okay, so here's Bly, blather, being a complete flack for, you know, Verped is like motherhood and apple pie, right? All we want to do is educate the public, right? This is a stance that goes back to the 70s. We all know what group. I don't even have to soil the microphone with that name. But we're moving to various blow-ups around the 30-minute mark and then also around the 1 hour and 30-minute mark, which we'll cover in great loving detail here. Because Max is a bleeding soul here. You know, in the immortal words of Mel Brooks, there's nothing worse than a little bleeding Jew. So here, we're about to have some little bleeding Jew here moments from Max.
possibly can, particularly this key distinction between child molestation and pedophilia, which obviously, as your regular followers know.
Sorry, OBS is being a brat. Reconnect.
You know, that is a lot of the activity, is doing that support forum, because a lot of people, this key distinction between child child molestation and pedophilia, which obviously, as your regular followers know, are separate phenomena.
Okay, so I'm
distinct
hearing
phenomena.
help people manage their urges, help people
Mhm.
find peer support and a community where they feel like they can talk about their concerns and be themselves without fear of stigmatization, and
Yeah.
educate the public about the difference between would you call pedophilia a disordered sexuality? That's kind of what I've been saying.
Okay, so script. Okay, so the key issue has been raised. This is the big thing between Bly and Maxey. Um, I'm not seeing any evidence that there's anything more going on with Maxey than he needs to talk about his urges and he needs to talk about his lack of pedo bros and people to process his experience with. He makes various rhetorical stabs at trying to talk about all those other CL oriented people out there, not seeing that he has any real interest in anything but rehearsing his own particular issues with his urges and his own um, failure to find a peer group in which he can come to terms with who he is and what's going on with him. So the point that he takes up then with Bly is, would you call this a disorder or not? Bly, because he is installed, as I say, he's had the hands laid on. He is now installed as the strategy coordinator for VRPED. Is not able to use the disorder word about where he's coming from and his people, his position, his organization. Whereas Max desperately needs to say something about disorder. He needs to predicate that. He needs to attach that as an attribute. Otherwise, he gets very uncomfortable. So this is a person who, um, you know, I'm probably making too much of the fact that he has some Jewish heritage there, and therefore should be probably patched into some sort of Jewish moral framework. But he's clearly not patched into a Jewish moral framework. He's not patched into any moral framework. And he is suffering from it because he has no one to tell him where the order is in sexuality and where the disorder is. And so, of course, he's drifting, and he sees what's going to happen to a man like him who drifts into cuties and then from cuties drifts into worse things. So he wants to very much know what we would call, from the Christian term, the Judeo-Christian term, we would call the logos, the pattern of sexuality, which then would be the order of doing things in an orderly way, right? Doing them according to how God means us to do them. And from that perspective, then he would be able to kick off and say, well, this is the order of sexuality. And then with respect to that order, this pattern of sexual response that he as a not a map, of course, does not have, but still he feels compelled to talk about and calls himself Mr. Girl. He has this need to talk about it, but he doesn't have a sense of order from which to label something else disorder. And of course, he's upset with Bly because Bly won't go there, and Bly won't represent the disorder, which would allow Maxey to constitute himself as order. And if Maxey's the kind of person where if he doesn't know what's order and what's disorder, he's not happy. And so you'll see this, almost carnal desire for the Jewish law, the carnal desire for the Torah. I must be told what's right and what's wrong. And if Bly is not willing to do that for him, then we're going to get it's like Tevye, Fiddler on the Roof. Oy vey! You get these terrible cries of anguish and lostness from Maxey. And I'm laughing here, but I'm really quite sympathetic to the moral dilemma that he's in, where he simply has no moral guidance, and then he puts his toe into the whirlwind, the moral whirlwind of these organizations, the VRPED, the Before You Act, the Prostasia, which of course are complete moral chaos from my point of view, hypocritical moral chaos. And Maxey doesn't know that, and he dips his toe into the wonderful world of VRPED, and he gets all upset about it. So we're just going to let it play here for a few minutes, and you can enjoy the back and forth where Maxey is not having it. He's just not having it, as far as Bly refusing to accept that pedophilia or indeed necrophilia are sexually disordered. Now I have to figure out how to get back to that screen. But that's the key thing: is Maxey wants there to be a sexual order, which he represents, I guess, and then he wants there to be a sexual disorder, which is something that Mr. Bly is going to carry on his shoulders.
No, but
Let's go back.
Okay. So one of the key things in it is that we're seeking to help people understand themselves. We're helping, hopefully, for them to be able to talk about this, and to offer support and companionship specifically. So, and in a peer group setting. And one of the reasons for that is that people find it, I think, very difficult to reach out to non-pedophiles to talk about this for reasons we might talk about later. The other thing we want to do as well is to educate the public about pedophilia if we possibly can, particularly this key distinction between child molestation and pedophilia, which obviously, as your regular followers know, are separate phenomena.
Okay, so I'm
distinct
hearing
phenomena.
help people manage their urges, help people find peer support and a community where they feel like they can talk about their concerns and be themselves without fear of stigmatization, and educate the public about the difference between would you call pedophilia a disordered sexuality? That's kind of what I
OBS reconnected. Watch the white of his eye there.
These are very loaded terms. So I think one of the sort of
You're afraid of
issues
offending. You're afraid of offending pedophiles.
yes, I am, because
You're in
there's a
quite
very
the
large-
pickle, aren't you?
Max.
Yeah,
Look at
yeah,
you.
absolutely.
Look at
There's-
you. You're afraid you're gonna get canceled. Yeah, I got a critical email about you
Sure.
from
Yeah.
from a real pedophile. They were saying that you're a fake.
I am now drowning in bad faith. Bly's bad faith, Mr. Girl's bad faith, as well as the person who wrote the letter to Mr. Girl. All of these people are drowning in bad faith.
Fake vanilla pedophile, and that that you're not liked in the community.
About me personally, or about the organization?
And poor Bly maintains this facade of British politeness, which I admire him for, but it's Max is blistered with guilt and unhappiness about being what he is, and he needs someone else to be with him in that.
I think it was both. I think it was like you and your organization.
Yeah. So I mean,
But they were
it is
basically
true.
telling me like, hey, if you want to talk to the real deal, you should talk to me. I'll tell you about CP. I'll tell you about how I want to eradicate the age of consent. And I what I came to is that I'm not going to do that, but I will pass his sentiment along to you and see is that something that you've encountered. That are you hated?
Absolutely.
Are you hated by everyone? You're hated.
This is Max trying to talk about his life in the first person and completely failing. Why am I hated by everyone? That you will not hear Max say. Instead, he's trying to get Bly to carry the role of the universally hated and despised pedophile. This is what I call pedo-toileting. He's not able to carry his own shit. He has to get Bly to do it.
Hated by pedophiles and non-pedophiles alike.
No, but we do put ourselves in a specific position which says that we are against adult child sex. And that does anger some of the, if you like, I don't know what to call it, the traditional paedophile community online, where it was previously, I think, pretty much normal to say certain things about, adult child sex.
The NAMBLA
The
style.
NAMBLA type of thing, and the PIE and so on. And so I suppose, in a sense, we've come along and slightly spoiled that because, we're not agreeing with that sort of orthodoxy that had grown up among a very, alienated and stigmatized population. But we don't agree with it. And yes, you're right. We do get obviously a lot of online hate as well. But I
Sure.
think what I would set against all of that really is just the fact that we do reach a lot of people who are in the place that I was in, really. I mean, I didn't connect to the pedophile communities at all online for several decades of my life, and despite having sort of considered doing so early on in my life. And people like me tend to hover outside of the online pedophile communities because we don't want to get dragged into illegal stuff. And we tend to hover outside of, obviously, society at large because we know that we're not fully accepted in it. So so it is an awkward place to be, yeah.
There's people in the chat telling people to flag the channel to get it removed from YouTube.
Your channel?
Yeah. People are trying to get this video and my channel taken down.
Yeah, that will happen.
So to my mods, if there are any mods in here, anybody who's trying to organize.
This is a man whose lack of having a personality extends so far that he has various functions of his personality dealt out to Bly. He's got various functions of his human personality dealt out to the mods, and various functions of his personality dealt out to his followers. He's got 12,000 followers. So rather than saying, what he feels and thinks, oh, my followers, blah, 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 as if anyone cared about YouTube followers. Whoops, what have I done?
False flagging, we have to ban them. No offense.
There's so much hate out there, and Max wants you to know that Max is in control of the anti-pedo hate. Max is not. Max, I guess, lives with anti-pedo hate in his head all the time. But at least when Max is running a channel, then he can control the anti-pedo hate. Isn't that nice?
But I'm all about free speech and criticism. But if you're trying to get people to take the channel down, I have to ban you. Can you tell?
So Max is the censor here. This is an important part of the psychological functionality, is the person inside your head who says what can be said in public and what can't. And Max is going to play the censor here. So just letting you know that Max has a functioning censor. He can censor not this material, but this material.
Tell us approximately how old you are. Somebody's asking.
I'm in my 40s.
Okay. Do you mind me interrupting you?
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I don't have like a list of pre-prepared things to say, so it's it's a question of where this discussion leads.
Okay, I'm gonna probably interrupt you semi-frequently in this conversation.
Okay.
So, I want to press you on why you aren't willing to call pedophilia a disordered sexuality.
From a scientific...
I know the political reasons.
Okay. Well, I mean, okay, so let's just quickly address the political reasons if we can for a second, because I think there is a lot of reaction in people, and I get a reaction actually when somebody calls me disordered.
Yeah, I'm saying there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, that's right. And
there's something wrong with you, Reed. In other words, there's something right with Maxie, but wrong with Reed, but right with Maxie, because he's the censor, and he is the force for moral order. You see, the moral order, it's all on his shoulders when he's not watching Cuties.
I think intellectually I can. Well, I think intellectually I can sort of understand it. I can understand why, like a scientist who was sort of coming from a point of view of having a model of ordered sexuality, if you like, would say disordered. I can see why what I'm into diverges from, the, for want of a better word, the natural pattern of things from the normative.
It's not that's not. I don't think we call things disordered just when they're non-normative.
No, but
we call them disordered when they're undesirable.
Yes, and I think it is difficult for someone like me to hear that and to say, well, there's two reasons. One is that I can't change it. As far as I can tell, I can't change it. And therefore, it becomes a way of saying that I, as a person, am intrinsically disordered, and that's a tough thing to hear, I think, for anybody.
He described it as a tough thing to hear, and that tends to be Bly's language that he camps out on. Bly will be accused by Maxie in the very soon, because things get crazy at 30. Bly will be accused by Maxie of having an outsized response, but I think that's really wishful thinking on Maxie's part. What he wants, of course, is to have the trap snap shut on Bly's hand and Bly screaming in pain. That's sort of what he's going for with all this talk of order and disorder. I mean, he's not in touch with Yahweh to be able to say, well, this is the moral order according to the person who created the universe. There's no sense of any moral order within Maxie. He's not. He defines himself as not a religiously educated person, and therefore his talk of moral order and moral disorder is really an expression of his own moral chaos.
I think it's difficult to process because, and this is where I think a lot of us sort of go to quite dark places, suicidal places, because we're just like, well, I'm intrinsically disordered, you know. If that's
well,
what
are you
everyone's
gonna fucking feel suicidal if I press you on this?
Now, this is interesting. This is straight up abuse. Are you going to fucking feel suicidal if I press you on this? What I think Maxie is looking for is performative, not a performative rage, which he talks about in another video, which is the idea of another psychological author. Instead, what Maxie seems to be looking for is a performative writhing in shame on Bly's part, which Bly, being British, is not disposed to give him. But the emotional response that Maxie seems to be looking for is, oh, I'm so ashamed of being a pedophile. I'm so ashamed I'm going to kill myself. And if Maxie sees someone else doing that, then it's like, oh, what a relief. Now Maxie doesn't have to feel that because Maxie has tricked Bly into performing the pedophile shame routine. Now, I'm a theatrical person. I play all the different characters. I play all the different stories. And if I sense that a person needs for me to enact pedophile shame, then I will do that as a way of keeping them entertained and helping them understand what's going on inside of them, because they can't. It's too bitter to experience in the first person. Maxie doesn't have the chops theatrically to be able to say, oh, I am a pedophile. I'm feeling pedophile shame. He doesn't have that. So he's trying to get Bly to do that. Bly is not much of an actor either. He doesn't understand. He doesn't have the antennae to understand that this is what Max needs for him to do. So Max keeps trying to get Bly to enact Maxie's pedo shame, and Bly won't do it. And this is why we have Bly is more and more bemused, and Maxie is more and more upset and frustrated because he feels the terrible pedo shame, and he brings a pedo onto his podcast so the pedo can be humiliated and feel the pedo shame, which he and all of his followers think is acceptable and right to do. And Bly isn't doing it, and that's why you'll see Maxie getting more and more upset. I need to see the pedo shame. I need to see the pedo shame, because this is Maxie's need that he brings to this conversation. And he's trying to get other people. Maxie is active now on Twitter, trying to get other people and draw them into this pedo toileting where he has all this emotional shit, and he's trying to get Maxie to be the one who's experiencing Maxie is trying to get Bly to experience the pedo shame. And it gets more intense. Watch.
No, you can ask what you like. I'm just explaining sort of why there's a lot of, I'm describing my personal reaction to hearing that word disordered. Now, if you take that and multiply that to how a community feels, like all of the individual members of the community feels, it creates a situation where we want a space away from being told we're disordered. We can go and get that anyway.
But why? See,
okay, now here, this is a beautiful moment. Bly said we want a space away from being told that we're disordered, and Maxie responds as much as to say, but that doesn't meet my needs. I need you to writhe in the emotional pain of having a disordered sexuality as a break from me writhing in the pain of having a disordered sexuality. And so when Bly bows out, you'll see Maxie getting less and less. I'm going to go back a second here so you can see it again.
I want to press you on why you aren't willing to call pedophilia a disordered sexuality.
From a
other than
scientific,
I know the political
yeah,
reasons.
okay. Well, I mean, okay, so let's just quickly address the political reasons if we can for a second, because I think there is a lot of reaction in people, and I get a reaction actually when somebody calls me disordered,
Yeah, I'm saying
because
there's
Okay, at this point, when Bly admits that he does have a reaction, then we get a yeah out of Maxie.
something wrong with you.
There's something wrong with you, Bly. Something wrong with you.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
right.
What do you think
intellectually, I
about
can,
that?
well, I think intellectually I can sort of understand it. I can understand why, like a scientist who was sort of coming from a point of view of having a model of ordered sexuality, if you like, would say
Yeah.
disordered. I can see why what I'm into diverges from, the, for want of a better word, the natural pattern of things from
Well,
the
would you?
normative.
It's not that's not.
But
It's not that it's that's not. I don't think we call things disordered just when they're non-normative.
no,
We call
well,
them
exactly.
disordered when they're undesirable.
Yes. And I think it is difficult for someone like me to hear that and to say, well, there's two reasons. One is that I can't change it, as far as I can tell. I can't change it, and therefore it becomes a way of saying that I, as a person, am intrinsically disordered, and that's a tough thing to hear. I think for anybody, um, I think it's difficult to process because, and this is where I think a lot of us sort of go to quite dark places, suicidal places, because we're just like, well, I'm intrinsically disordered, if
Well,
that's what everyone's telling me.
are you gonna fucking feel suicidal if I press you on this?
No, no, you can ask what you like. I'm just explaining sort of why there's a lot of, I'm describing my personal reaction to hearing that word disordered. Now, if you take that and multiply that to how a community feels, like all of the individual members of the community feels, it creates a situation where we want a space away from being told we're disordered. We can go and get
But
that anyway.
why?
You
But
just go
why?
onto it.
See that I don't agree with that.
It doesn't work for Maxie. Aren't you listening, Bly? It doesn't work for Maxie. Maxie wants to see somebody suicidal, somebody upset. He wants the emotional tonality of shame over lusting for cuties.
Like, there's tons of communities built around coping with or managing or living with psychological disorders. Like
Sure.
if somebody comes on and like if I'm talking to somebody who has OCD and they're washing their hands 10,000 times every time they go to the bathroom,
Sure.
and I say, okay, so you have a disorder, they're gonna say yes.
They
I think
are.
that I think I and they're not gonna say like, well, yeah, I know it's unusual that I wash my hands 10,000 times and that I have to like scrape my skin off every time, like whatever. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it, Max. Like they're gonna say, well, yeah, it would be ideal if that weren't how I am.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that applies to every single thing that is thought of as disordered or has been thought of as disordered. And I think a lot of us with with the sexuality cue, I think we or rather with the sexuality thing, we take our cue from the fact that um, we have as a society we sort of think that sexual desires are both innate and to a certain extent inalienable. And so to be in a position where someone is saying it's disordered at the same
Hmm.
time as it's inalienable, I think does create a lot of dissonance for people like me. And certainly, and you're right, there is a political reason, and I'm sort of conscious as I speak
Well,
to
do
you.
you
If I were
think
to say,
being
well, if I were to say, yeah, yeah, I'm disordered, and what of it? You're right. I
yeah?
would get a reaction from my own community who would say,
Well,
"Why are you
okay,
saying that? Why are you pushing
okay.
back at
Do you think
this
necrophilia
concept?"
is a disorder?
I think things are a disorder when, and this is where the diagnostic and statistical manual is important. They create.
We're sort of going now into a space of simultaneously failing on both sides. Um, Having failed to rouse the desired feeling of shame from his interlocutor, Bly, Max is now he's playing the necrophilia card. Because presumably, if you don't feel shame about anything else, you would feel shame about having sex with a dead body if you feel shame about anything at all. Um, Bly fails to fire back and say, well, there is a sexual order, even if you're not Judeo-Christian, it is kind of part of the order of sexuality that it is about life and it's about young people and sharing their vital juices, and it's about as far from death as anything could be. And if you doing it with a dead body, you're doing it wrong. But Bly has this tremendous failure of not being able to say, well, I have a sense of sexual order that does not include necrophilia. Bly apparently can't say that, and that I don't know how to have a conversation with someone who doesn't recognize that sex with dead bodies is not the way to go. Now, I say that, but of course, one has disturbing images in dreams, and this is probably more than I should share. But when I was coming to terms with the poetic vocation, I did have a necrophiliac dream about my own father. I was confronted with my father's corpse. In the context of the dream, the only thing I could do was to make love with it out of sorrow and trying to bring my father back to life. And I was pumping my energy into my father's corpse and trying to bring him back to life. And I woke up and it was absolutely horrible because I don't feel about that way about my father at all. But of course, when you're presented with imagery that's so bizarre and so unacceptable, you are forced, if you know what's good for you, to come up with schemes of interpretation. And of course, my business is to bring the dead gods back to life, the dead patriarchal gods back to life, which I do by reciting heroic poetry about Poseidon and Zeus, blah, blah, blah. So if you have a Jungian perspective, then you're not locked in to the terrible shame that occurs from taking the highly charged boy imagery, or God forbid, the highly charged girl imagery, or the even worse, the highly charged dead body imagery. You're not obliged to take that literally. For me, certainly, it's my way of walking the road to the world of the dead and bringing back the dead images and then sharing them with people in 2022, because that's my professional life as a traditional poet. And you can read about the Nequia and the Odyssey if that's the kind of thing you're into. But these are people who are not religiously educated, who don't have the ability to understand that there is a sexual order coming down from the Judeo-Christian tradition, and that certain things are outside of that sexual and moral order. And since they're both spinning around in sexual chaos, the conversation just gets completely nonsensical and very bad.
I don't think that applies to every single thing that is thought of as disordered or has been thought of as disordered. And I think a lot of us with the sexuality cue, I think we or rather with the sexuality thing, we take our cue from the fact that we have, as a society, we sort of think that, sexual desires are both innate and to a certain extent inalienable. And so to be in a position where someone is saying it's disordered at the same time as it's inalienable, I think does create a lot of dissonance for people like me. And certainly, and you're right, there is a political reason, and I'm sort of conscious as I speak.
Well, do you think being
if I were to say, yeah, I'm disordered and what of it? You're right.
Yeah.
I would get a reaction from my own community who would say,
Well,
"Why are you saying that? Why are you pushing back?"
Do you think necrophilia is a disorder?
I think things are a disorder when, and this is where the diagnostic and statistical manual is important, they create undesirable effects in the real world. And I think we are on very much that cusp.
Okay, so you don't think necrophilia is a disordered sexuality?
No, I don't.
Bly's response is so precious here because, of course, Bly has been forced into emotionally unsavory territory by a man who wants nothing so much as to force him into emotionally unsavory territory. If pedophilia no longer gives the charge of horror and moral opprobrium, well, maybe necrophilia will do it. Now, if we run out of a moral charge of necrophilia, where we're going to go from there, I don't know, and I don't want to think. But at the moment, though, in the context of this conversation, Max is happy because the necrophilia is bringing the emotional charge of moral horror that he wants to see Bly writhing in. And Bly, bless his soul, doesn't have the wit to extricate himself from this trap in which Max has put him. This is quite, to me, it's as exhilarating as watching chess, watching a replay of a chess game.
I think so. I think it's...
So if I say I go through my entire life and the only people I've ever had sex with were dead, and the only people I want to have sex with...
It's
Okay, okay,
different
okay,
if
okay,
you're
okay,
having
okay,
sex.
okay, okay, okay,
That's
okay.
really, really
Okay, okay,
important.
okay, all right, Bly. Okay. The only people I want to have sex with are dead. I am never going to have sex with anybody. I just want to have
You
sex
can
with dead
live
people.
you can live a life that is
I'm
orderly in that
I'm not
scenario.
saying my life would be disordered. I'm saying you would not say that I have some kind of sexual disorder.
I think what I would do is if somebody came to me with saying a verpid and saying like this is my situation, I don't start the conversation by saying, okay, so point one, you've got a disorder. I wait for
Okay,
them to
it's
tell
fine if you think
me
I'm
how they
rude, but
see.
saying I'm rude is different from saying I'm wrong.
Now, this is interesting because this is where Maxie starts with the wishful thinking, and Bly is not really being rude here. So the rude language is coming from Max. I just want to keep an eye on that because you'll get many other accusations from from Max that Bly is using rude language, and of course he isn't. It's just that I don't think Max knows how to have a conversation without it turning into an escalation and accusations and wild violence. Mr. Dr. Lopez, Dr. Robert Lopez talks about the lack of verbal skills that comes to you from having two socially active lesbian parents who are always fighting about this and that. And this seems to be where Max is coming from. Is for some reason, Bly is perfectly well set up to have a conversation where he puts forward the verped view, and this is not where Max wants to go. Max wants to see somebody else. He wants to see somebody upset about pedophilia, and it shouldn't be him, Max. It should be Bly, and Mr. Bly should be upset about the fact that he's a pedophile. And if that's not going to do it, then Max is going to call Bly a necrophile and ask why he's not upset about that. And when Bly says, when Bly tries to get out of that trap, then Max is going to say that Bly is being rude, which is just hilarious.
Um, there are multiple perspectives on it. I'm aware of a lot of them. I'm aware of like the scientific perspective.
Well, I would like
the
to talk
evolutionary
about my
perspective.
perspective and your perspective.
Sure.
Are you saying
Yeah,
you don't
I
want to
don't.
talk about this anymore?
When you work as a professional troll, you just be like, sometimes you're just like, ah, the trolling. You just want to be like, like Ben Shapiro, trolling, trolling, trolling. Keep those doggies trolling. Let's go back and listen to that again.
I don't think that applies to every single thing that is thought of as disordered or has been thought of as disordered. And I think a lot of us with with the sexuality cue, I think we or rather with the sexuality thing, we take our cue from the fact that we have as a society we sort of think that sexual desires are both innate and to a certain extent inalienable. And so to be in a position where someone is saying it's disordered at the same
Mm-hmm.
time as it's inalienable, I think does create a lot of dissonance for people like me. And certainly, and you're right, there is a political reason, and I'm sort of conscious as I speak
Well,
to
do
you.
you
If I were
think
to say,
being
well, if I were to say, yeah, I'm disordered and what of it? You're right. I
yeah.
would get a reaction from my own community who would say,
Well,
"Why are you
okay,
saying that? Why are you pushing
okay.
back at
Do you think
this
necrophilia
concept?"
is a disorder?
I think things are a disorder when, and this is where the diagnostic and statistical manual is important, they create undesirable effects in the real world. And I think we are on very much that cusp
Okay, so
where
you don't think necrophilia is a disordered sexuality.
no, I don't think so. I think it's,
So if I
um,
say I go through my entire life and I the only people I've ever had sex with were dead, and the only people I
no,
want
no,
to have sex
no,
with.
no. It's
Okay, okay,
different
okay,
if
okay,
you're
okay,
having
okay, okay,
sex.
okay, okay,
That's
okay.
really, really
Okay,
important.
okay, okay, all right, Bly. Okay, the only people I want to have sex with are dead. I am never going to have sex with anybody. I just want to have
You
sex
can
with dead
live,
people.
you can live a life that is
I'm
orderly in that
I'm not
scenario.
saying my life would be disordered. I'm saying you would not say that I have some kind of sexual disorder.
I think what I would do is if somebody came to me with saying a verpid and saying like this is my situation, I don't start the conversation by saying, okay, so point one, you've got a disorder. I wait for
Okay,
them to
it's
tell
fine if you think
me
I'm
how they
rude, but
see.
saying I'm rude is different from saying I'm wrong.
Um, there are multiple perspectives on it. I'm aware of a lot of them. I'm aware of like the scientific
Well, I would
perspective,
like
the
to talk
evolutionary
about my
perspective.
perspective and your perspective.
Sure.
Are you saying
Yeah,
you don't
I
want to
don't.
talk about this anymore?
No, we can talk about it. I'm saying that personally, I
Yeah.
do find that I get a reaction when you say it's disordered. Not because I think that it's great and because I want to go out and act on it or any of those things, just because I feel, and this is a feelings thing, I just feel like, we've begun the conversation by saying, well, obviously you're wrong, but now let's look at why. And I think, you know, I know you're aware of all the nuance around this. So, but for me,
I think
yeah,
my audience
it's
is
a
too.
challenging thing. Absolutely. And I think, it's just a very tough thing to hear. And I think if you start that conversation, and I suppose, I'm a gay man as well. I
Well, it's
absolutely
tough. But
do
again, but
make a
telling me it's tough to like, yeah, okay. Well, I think that the intellectual honesty dictates that you differentiate between something being tough to hear and something being not true. So if you're telling me it's tough to
um
hear, you're telling me that
well
you're mad
well
at me, you're telling me
oh,
that I'm annoying or I'm rude or I've hurt your feelings. I don't have any issue with any of that. But if you're telling me it's
sure.
not true, then I do want to push you on at least understanding why
Okay.
I'm saying it.
Well, if, from an objective point of view, I mean, you've talked a lot about how subjectivity and disordered is a word that comes from a frame of reference. In other words, it says that there is a way to be ordered and there is a way to be disordered.
Okay, 10 out of 10, any kind of interview situation where someone's going to throw unpredictable material at you, there's going to be times when you're going to be thrown off your feet a little bit. A minute or two later, Bly comes back very strongly by saying, where is the vision of moral order, with reference to which we can start talking about moral disorder? And that's what Maxi does not have.
And that
Yes.
these have and saying disordered, if you come
Yes.
at it from a point of view of saying, I do not think that these have objective value, as saying, disordered is a fact or disordered is not a fact,
No, I'm
then
saying
I can
there's
go along with that.
utility. I'm saying
Yeah.
there is great utility in the DSM and great utility in labeling certain behaviors and certain thought patterns as disordered.
Yeah. I think I certainly am with you on the behaviors part. Certain behaviors are
I know,
disordered in
but
the
I'm
sense that
talking
they
about
cause
the
harm.
thought pattern. I only said behaviors because I was stalling to think of the words thought
Okay.
pattern.
He's building up to the big sick fuck accusation. You can tell he's talking in scientific language. He's avoiding religious language, but he's going to get down to the street language, which I guess is where Maxie wants to be with um, telling Bly that he's a sick fuck. He'll get there. He'll get there in time, but you can see he's kind of warming up to it very gradually.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I think that this is something that spontaneously arises in nature. You can call that disordered
Yeah,
if you
I
want,
am.
but I
Yes, I
don't.
do. I do want to, and I want to know why
Where
you
I
don't
would
want to.
differ.
If you're
Well,
saying you don't want to because it will hurt your feelings, or you're saying
no,
you
no.
don't want to because people will get mad at you, that
I'm
I
saying
understand that.
those are two reasons. But if you ask me about my actual beliefs, my sort of ontology about it, if you like, then I think disordered is as a subjective judgment. Particularly when it comes to sort of thoughts and as opposed to actions, because
Yeah.
the
Yes, it is subjective. Yes,
utilitarian
I am
argument
making.
about
I
it.
know. I'm not saying it's fucking
Yeah,
that God doesn't like it. I am making a
sure.
subjective statement, subjective on behalf of, like, society.
Yeah, and
Okay,
so I suppose
somebody.
I'm just saying there's an alternative subjective attitude to that says it isn't disordered. What's disordered would be certain behaviours.
Okay,
And
let
I
me.
don't have difficulty with sort of, agreeing with the people who take that view.
Okay. Strategy coordinator. I want to coordinate your fucking strategy a little bit here, mister. Okay, somebody wrote in, desire is not disorder. Lack of control is. Is being attracted to a married person a disorder? I want to say no.
Okay, so let's take a break. Having failed to get a shameful blush from Bly with the P word, having gone to the N word, he's now going into a bizarre made up fetish, which I had never really heard of before, of only being attracted to people who are already married. And he tries to get Bly to talk about whether that's orderly or not, with the results not being any better. Let's flip up to my text about my comments that I made watching it last night. Okay, so at minute 24, I said there is one pattern of sexual orientation. We all know what it is. It's being a husband and father like Hashem. That's the holy name, which is a Jewish euphemism for Yahweh. I like to use Hashem because when I use the names of gods, they show up. That's what I do as a poet, is I create the emotional experience of being around Zeus or being around Hera and them doing what they do and everyone else responding to them as if they really were the god that they pretend to be. So I tend to avoid using the names of the gods directly. It's being a husband and father like Hashem intended. Everything else is sexual disorientation. 25, Max leans heavy into the why don't you hate yourself as much as I do game. Bly is always happy to play along. 32, pedophilia and necrophilia not disordered. Wow, Bly is on a roll here. I mean that in a negative sense. Bly, do you have any vision for sexual order at all? Any dividing line between sexual order and sexual chaos? I think he does come back a little bit with something like that. 3509, the language about annoying / rude / mad / hurt feelings language is coming entirely from Maxi. Bly is remaining safe behind a wall of British politeness. As with Bobby Lopez, the scars of a lesbian on lesbian parenting situation are evident in the lack of social skills. Is there a way to have a conversation that doesn't quickly devolve into clickbaity argumentation? 36, I was inspired to make a massive moral generalization. Max does not himself identify with Judaism or the Torah or the power behind the Torah. So I wrote, just to be obnoxious, there never was a Jew without a vision of moral order. There never was a Jew who could live up to that moral order. Once Maxi, I think, gets some more religious thinking under his belt, he'll realize how well his needs are met to have the Torah telling him what is right and what is wrong, what is ordered, what is not ordered, and having Hashem periodically spank him. I think that would go a long ways to meet Mr. Girl's emotional needs. A little Hashem action on the backside. Minute 53. Okay, so skipping ahead to minute 53, Cantor's 2018 Include the P tweet is here bearing fruit. Max hears the call to an in-depth discussion of sexual ethics, an attempt to resolve whether P is a legitimate orientation or not, one that can find fulfillment in action or not, and he hearkens to that call and provides the morally informed discussion. Max veers rapidly back and forth from the finest traditions of Jewish moral inquiry to being the boy who needs to have his mouth scrubbed out with soap to remove the childhood lesbian abuse. What was I responding to at 53? I don't even remember. Because if Max is going to have a serious moral discussion, I'm all up for it. But I don't think Max is quite he's not quite the Torah boy, the scholar of the Torah, to be able to have the moral discussion that he clearly needs to have, and is trying to get Bly to have. And of course, Bly is no better equipped.
That's not a direct answer. I think
so
you have to have an answer for this. What?
This is a little Jewish boy asking questions. I mean, I've never been confronted with someone with such a vast cognitive dissonance between the extent to which they are a little Jewish boy asking questions, and on the one hand, and on the other hand, the extent to which they disaffiliate, disavow, disconnect themselves from the Jewish moral tradition in which little Jewish boys would ask the questions and get the Torah answers, and they'd spend years and years studying the Jewish sexual law. But can you look at your mother? Is that wrong? Yes, it is wrong. Don't do it. You get clear answers if you bring sexual questions to the early books of the Bible, because apparently the ancient Jews were carrying on and had to be told what to do and what not to do in very clear, simple terms. And this is where our Maxi is
Is pedophilia? It has to either be a sexual orientation or a disorder. or a,
Or does it
a
have to be one
pattern,
of those
or
two things? Yeah, I mean, there's loads of possibilities. It could be a sexual disorder, it could be a disability, it could be an illness, it could
so
be
what is it? So are you
it
saying it
could be a
can't be?
sexuality, it could be a sexual orientation,
So what
it
is
could
it?
be.
This is the central riddle of Max's life. What is it? What is it? What is it? He can't get away from that question.
What do you think it is?
From my point of view, it's my sexuality. That's how I see it.
Okay, so to you, you see it as basically an orientation, just like straight or gay.
Yeah. Yeah. Fundamentally, I think there's good evidence for that.
Can I push back on you?
Go ahead.
When you say sexuality is inalienable in the civilized world, in the Western world, let's say, most people are going to think that you're talking about having premarital sex and not being stoned to death, having gay sex, gay marriage even, masturbating, porn, and all of these are actions. And we agree in the Western world that a sexual orientation is and should be inalienable, not just in thought and fantasy.
This I profoundly disagree with. I don't want to camp out on this issue, but the whole point of Opus Generis is to show the dance, is to show the dialectic, to show the transformation from one pattern of relationship to the next. A little baby is all about the mother. How many times have I said this? I'm getting so sick of having to say it over and over again. Then the baby struggles to get away from the mother. Maybe it gets pulled back. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe a male god pulls it away, in which case the little boy is all about the male god. Maybe he stays with the male god, in which case it's Zeus and Ganymede. Maybe he doesn't stay with the male god, in which case, very much like Poseidon and Pelops, the boy Pelops goes on to become a husband and father in his own right. You know, both are possible. A boy tries to exist and make his will felt, his masculine will felt in the world without a father to back him up. And of course, it goes very badly when Telemachus tries to act independently, when he tries to go against Penelope and tries to go against the suitors and tries to rally the townsfolk. That doesn't go anywhere. But at the same time, the boy continues to grow and makes relationships, and eventually he's old enough to turn away from playing with boys, as symbolized by Cupid, and turn towards playing with girls, as symbolized by Daphne. We've done that a million frickin' times. I'm getting sick of it. Why am I even talking about this?
What is it? So are you saying
it could be a
can't
sexuality? It could be a sexual orientation.
So what is it?
Be,
what do you think it is?
From my point of view, it's my sexuality. That's how I see it.
Okay, so to you, you see it as basically an orientation, just like straight or gay.
Yeah. Yeah. Fundamentally, I think there's good evidence for that.
Can I push back on you?
Go ahead.
When you say sexuality is inalienable in the civilized world, in the Western world.
Right. Well, first of all, inalienable. The idea that you couldn't lose your human rights is in the context of 18th century moral discourse is not what we're talking about here. What he means is more like inalterable or immutable, I think is the term. That the fact that one is black, one's skin color is black, that's an immutable racial characteristic, and one should not be discriminated against for immutable sexual characteristics, immutable racial characteristics. From that, then, drawing on the civil rights rhetoric, we have people saying you shouldn't be discriminated against based on immutable sexual orientations. And the idea that the Western civilization has always articulated the immutability of sexual orientations is a bad idea, which Opus Generis is aimed at, like a cannon, to refute. Because if you are not understanding that Apollo turns from the love of boys to the love of girls when you read Ovid's Metamorphoses, Daphne and Apollo, then you're not reading that poem at all. That poem used to be canonical. It used to be a part of the 6 tales from Ovid that everybody studied in Latin 3 back when people took 4 years of Latin. Virgil would be Latin 4, then Ovid would be your Latin 3 syllabus. So this is why people ask me why I'm harping on the Opus Generis poems all the time. It's precisely for reasons like this, is you have a man spinning around in chaos, terrified that he had a girl-oriented thought towards one of the 11-year-old cuties last Thursday afternoon, and that defines him as an immutable blah, blah, blah. And then he gives all these negative characteristics which are associated with other people who have that. And then he wants other people, like Bly, to carry the shame for that forever because he thinks that he would be carrying the shame for that forever when he simply had one little girly thought of a Thursday afternoon. So this is why opus generis is necessary, is to make it super clear to people that one's sexual orientations and patterns of libido flow and all that are subject to change throughout life.
So.
Yeah, before they start going in. And when you get married to a girl your own age, that's when the adjustment process is just getting started, as any husband will tell you, because you always have to be doing things differently than you did them before, differently than how you want, in order to keep on good terms with the wife. That's just how it is. Everyone who talks about marriage says the husband must die every day to please and serve the wife must die every day to please and serve the husband, and that's how a good marriage goes. So I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense about people's sexual orientations being inalienable, as if it was ever a question of me giving my sexual orientation to another person. That's what inalienable would mean. Alienos would be a different person. No. Okay.
In the Western world, that a sexual orientation.
OBS is reconnected for the fourth time. So he's going to talk again about sexual disorientation. He calls it sexual orientation, but I think everybody knows who's looked at the life of the animals or people, normal human beings, that there is one pattern of sexual orientation and everything else is a pattern of sexual disorientation. I think that should be obvious to anyone. But the question is, are we going to start calling what I call the ZINP? Zoophilia, incest, necrophilia, and pedophilia. Are we going to start calling those things? Are we going to start calling those things sexual orientations? No, I hope not. I hope people will continue to understand them to be sexual disorientations.
Is and should be inalienable, not just in thought and fantasy, but in action. When you want to include pedophilia as an orientation, though it may function like one, and though you can say, you could be straight without ever having sex with anybody, you can be gay without ever having sex with anybody, the orientation is separate from the action. In every other case, when we're talking about someone's sexual orientation and their right to have that orientation, we're also talking about supporting them getting their rocks off as a society.
Yeah.
So for the moment, Max is talking like baby Yahweh, like he made the world and he made male and female separately, and he made the man and woman to leave their mother and father and come together and they shall become one flesh. He's talking about like he knows the moral order. But then a minute later, he'll be talking like he's the guy who watches cuties, because he is every inch the guy who watches cuties.
Do you see why I am concerned about the level of nuance that you are asking people to have to say, well, yes, pedophilia is a sexual orientation. It's just different from every other orientation in that we do frown upon and criminalize acting on it, but otherwise it's an orientation that should be accepted and respected all the same. Whereas if you just say it's a disorder, and disorder in the sense of every other disorder, disorders when you want to do something or are doing something that the rest of us don't like. That's just all disorders.
Just had a thought here. Max continues to deny that he's coming from a Jewish background. What I'm seeing here for the first time in my life is what a firmament is. Because I never knew exactly what a firmament was. And of course, I asked what a firmament was in the first grade Sunday school class. I never got a clear answer from the woman who was teaching the class. When you see someone in chaos, like Max is, you're seeing someone who has not got a firmament. There has been no firming up between the land, the dry land, and the wet, marshy, mushy waters. And so creation has not really happened because there has been no firmament, no firming up. So what Maxie is expressing is that he is in a state of sexual tohu bohu, and no firmament has occurred, no firming up of his sexual identity. And he finds this displeasing. So the direction he's moving towards is a direction of towards a firmament of his own personal sexual chaos, which includes a lot of moral impulses, but it also includes a lot of cuties impulses, and that's what makes it tohu bohu, and that's what makes it necessary for him to look for a firmament. And Bly, bless his heart, did not bring a firmament to this interview. So let that be a piece of advice to Mr. Bly Rede. If you're dealing with a man in sexual chaos, don't be afraid to say, looks like you need a firmament, and I'm sorry I didn't bring a firmament with me to this interview.
If you call it a disorder, then you don't have to explain anything, and you don't have to deal with the charge that you are going to get repeatedly over and over again that you're trying to normalize pedophilia. Yes. Okay.
I'm interested in that word normalize, because I think it's a very low.
Strategy coordinator gonna coordinate. Normalization, of course, as we know from after the ball, has always been the big strategy, and so this is the talking point on which Bly is prepared to talk.
Word, and I think it's a very common word, and I had it thrown at me a great deal when I was on Twitter.
No, it's a common word. It is, yes, common, very common, that word, normalize. Normal people, that's what they talk about, normalization.
Yeah.
Normalize, to me, this is normal to me. I don't mean that it's normal in the sense, in a prescriptive sense. I don't mean I think it should be normal for everybody. I just mean that in a descriptive sense, this is normal for me. In other words, it's part of, my daily reality.
That's not what...
Normal for me. Another piece of advice, never use the term normal for me. Normal for me. Norms are things that are adopted by society as a whole precisely because people are squirrely and they want to do their own special thing. When you say normal for me, you've broken both the term normal and the term for me. So please never use that expression ever again, Bly.
But that's not what people mean.
I know that's not what they mean.
When you start doing, you're freaking me out. I'm gonna be honest with you. You're scaring me. You're scaring me.
What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid that you are too sensitive to be able to be the firm face of, like...
The firmamentum is a desideratum. He wants him to be firm. Max wants Bly to be firm, and Bly is not the man to offer the firmness that Max needs. Please give a firmament.
Telling people the difference between thoughts and actions.
Explain
because because every time you dance around a question, sure, it comes off to people who hate you like their suspicions are, and I don't think they are right. I believe what you're saying. I believe what you're saying, but if you say, Max, are you cheating on your girlfriend? And I say, well, okay, what's cheating?
Yeah, it's
what do you mean by cheating? That's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Immediately you're going to be like, well, okay, so yes, you are.
Sure.
And if you're not willing to be called abnormal or disordered,
no, I'm willing to be called abnormal.
I think you should change the name of virtuous pedophiles to sick fucks anonymous.
Max. You need a firmament. This is why you are lashing out at Bly.
Anonymous. sick fucks who respect the law. And then, what is there to argue about if you just own it?
Well, how are we going to get people to come to us to support them if we're called sick fucks? People who identify as sick fucks, or people?
Yeah, just be like, you got to admit that you're kind of a sick fuck, and then we can help you.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Like Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics.
Hamartia. Hamartia is the Greek word for I shoot an arrow and it doesn't quite hit the person I wanted to make it hit. In other words, it missed. It missed the mark. Hamartia, or hamartano, in the verb form, is used in the New Testament to talk about people who sin. That is to say, they're trying to follow the Jewish moral codes, but they screw up, and so they miss the mark. They sin. We had I believe he was a Yale educated. We had a professor at the University of Georgia who pronounced the word hamartia rather than hamartia. And we mock this behind his back. We always say Hamarsha, Hamarsha, Hamarsha behind his back. Why am I ranting about this? Because the process I'm seeing Mr. Girl, Max, engaged in is a process of recreating a Jewish moral tradition that he could have very easily simply by studying the Torah, but he has to have his own personal firmament. He has to have his own personal definition of sin. He has to have sinners. He has to have punishment. He has to have mechanisms for reincorporating sinners into the community. He has to have ways of driving out the morally unacceptable people from the community by labeling them sick fucks. This is modern street language. It's not ancient theological language like Hamarsha, 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 or the scapegoat, or some of the other terms that we know from Sunday school. But the discourse is a discourse of Hamarsha, Hamarsha, Hamarsha.
Anonymous is not virtuous wine sippers.
No, that's true. But then,
Okay, this is pointed to him as his one stab at wit. Alcoholics Anonymous is virtuous wine sippers. This I love because I think the virtuous pedophiles approach is complete nonsense. And here Max puts his finger on that nonsense. You attach virtuous as the locomotive, as the first car in the train, and then it pulls all the other cars along. That's why I call my podcast a virtue cast, precisely because then it sounds like it's something morally acceptable. And Max is calling bullshit on that, so point for Max. Virtuous wine sippers, nicely done.
and they're alcoholics. It's a different situation.
Yeah, but you go in and they say, okay, so you have a disease called alcoholism. Even if you never drink another drink for the rest of your life, this thing is always going to be with you. And if you can admit that, then reach out and take my hand. And I'm not saying that they have the best model or the best outcomes, but that part of it I think is pretty attractive, because no one's accusing Alcoholics Anonymous of not being able to admit that they're alcoholics.
I don't think we have no difficulty in admitting that we're
or not being able to admit that being an alcoholic means there's something wrong with you.
Right, but I don't know that Alcoholics Anonymous would go with that particular thing. They wouldn't start by saying there's something wrong.
They call it a
with
disease.
You. They're talking about individuals, and we're trying to give individuals hope for this, but also we are perfect from we are pedophiles, and we know that it's a problem in as much as
No,
we can't
see,
act on the.
Oh God, you're a nightmare. When you say in as much as, I'm not willing to be called abnormal or disordered.
No. I'm willing to be called abnormal.
I think you should
if
change the name of
things along.
Virtuous Pedophiles to Sick Fucks Anonymous. sick fucks who respect the law. And then,
the reason we're not...
what is there to argue about if you just own it?
Well, how are we going to get people to come to us to support them if we're called sick fucks? People who identify as sick fucks, or people who identify
just be like,
as
you got to
problem?
admit that you're kind of a sick fuck, and then we can help you.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Like Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is not virtuous wine sippers.
No, that's true. But then they're alcoholics. It's a different situation.
Yeah, but you go in and they say, okay, so you have a disease called alcoholism. Even if you never drink another drink for the rest of your life, this thing is always going to be with you. And if you can admit that, then reach out and take my hand. And I'm not saying that they have the best model or the best outcomes, but that part of it I think is pretty attractive, because no one's accusing Alcoholics Anonymous of not being able to admit that they're alcoholics.
I don't think we have no difficulty in admitting that we're
or not being able to admit that being an alcoholic means there's something wrong with you.
Right, but I don't know that Alcoholics Anonymous would go with that particular thing. They wouldn't start by saying there's something wrong.
They call it a
with
disease.
You. They're talking about individuals, and we're trying to give individuals hope for this, but also we are perfect from we are pedophiles, and we know that it's a problem in as much as we can't.
See.
Okay, so we're freeze framing And this is not a map, not a Jew, not a map, not a Jew. And he's literally screaming like Tevye, "If I were a straight man." He is literally going to screaming agonies, but because he's not getting the unequivocal moral denunciation that he is obviously passionately in need of. Okay, so this is a romance that I'd like to see happen. Max, Yahweh, Yahweh, Max. Because Yahweh is the figure, and Yahweh alone, not Zeus, Yahweh alone, who will give Maxie the moral spanking that he needs. He will give him the unequivocal, "You've been a bad boy, Max," spanking that he needs, the unequivocal denunciation. Bly, inasmuch as, in a way, minister, Bly will equivocate and give double talk like a good flack will for Verped. But this is clearly not meeting Maxie's needs. Max needs a firmament. He needs a Yahweh. He needs a Torah. He needs a moral code that will tell him when he can fuck and when he is a sick fuck. And without that, you're going to get Maxie tearing his hair out and screaming, "If I were a straight," like he's Tevye. He's not a Jew. He's not a map. And yet he's dancing around like the fiddler on the roof. Sorry, I've got people in my building. I can't use raw language. So we're gonna let Maxie talk.
Act on the.
God.
That's true, but then they're alcoholics.
In a way, minister, listen to the. It's precisely what I'm trying to figure out. What it is that's triggering Max, and it's Bly's use of equivocational language. Now, my reference there is to Yes, Minister, a show about how the deep state in England, that is to say, the permanent class of people who aren't in and out with the elections, will shine it on to the people who have won elections based on their rhetoric, and they think their rhetoric is something, and of course it isn't. And of course the permanent civil servants then have to kind of roll with whatever rhetorical nonsense the minister is talking, and they do that by saying, "Yes, minister," in a way, right? This is their way of agreeing with the minister. The example that they give is, that for the ultimate, the professional delivery of the term "in a way" is, Congo is the capital of Switzerland, isn't it? Oh yes, minister, in a way, yes, it is. It's agreeing with the other person's nonsense. So being British, being trained in this tradition of shining the other person on, you're getting these phrases like in as far as, or in as much as, or whatever it was. And that's what sets off our boy Maxie here. So we'll do that again because it's beautiful.
I'm interested in that word "normalize" because I think it's a very loaded word, and I think it's a very common word, and I had it thrown at me a great deal when I was on Twitter.
Yeah.
Normalize, to me, this is normal to me. I don't mean that it's normal in the sense, in a prescriptive sense. I don't mean I think it should be normal for everybody. I just mean that in a descriptive sense, this is normal for me. In other words, it's part of my daily reality.
That's not what people mean.
I know that's not what they mean.
When you start doing, you're freaking me out. I'm gonna be honest with you. You're scaring me.
Oh, Max,
you're scaring me.
What are you afraid of?
I'm afraid that you are too sensitive to be able to be the firm face of, like, telling people the difference between thoughts and actions. Because every time you dance around a question, you should change the name of virtuous pedophiles to Sick Fucks Anonymous. Sick fucks who respect the law.
Sick fucks.
And then, what is there to argue about if you just own it?
Just own it, Max. Just own it.
How are we going to get people to come to us to support them if we're called sick fucks? People who identify as sick fucks, or people?
Yeah, just be like, you got to admit that you're kind of a sick fuck, and then we can help you.
Yeah, it's not going to work.
Like Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics Anonymous is not virtuous wine sippers.
No, that's true. But then they're alcoholics. It's a different situation.
Yeah, but you go in
So
and they say, okay, so you have a disease called alcoholism. Even if you never drink another drink for the rest of your life, this thing is always going to be with you. And if you can admit that, then reach out and take my hand. And I'm not saying that they have the best model or the best outcomes, but that part of it I think is pretty attractive, because no one's accusing Alcoholics Anonymous of like not being able to admit that they're alcoholics.
I don't think we have no difficulty in admitting that we're
or not being able
pedophiles.
to admit that being an alcoholic means there's something wrong with you.
Right, but I don't know that Alcoholics Anonymous would go with that particular thing. Like, they wouldn't start by saying there's something
They
wrong
call it a
with you.
disease.
They're talking about individuals, and we're trying to give individuals hope for this, but also we are perfectly upfront. We are pedophiles, and we know that it's a problem in as much as
Are you ready for it? Problem in as much as
we
No,
can't
see,
act on the.
oh God, you're a nightmare. When you say in as much as, you've you've made a horrible mistake.
you ruined my firmament. A Jew must have a moral firmament. Now, if you get some dialectic, that would be more of a Greek thing. But he is clearly coming across as someone who is calling out to God for a firmament.
No, I don't
Listen,
think so. I think
I have gotten
I have to sort of be a bit more robust about this, maybe, because you've said I'm maybe being a bit oversensitive. I think I've been around in this particular debate for 5 years myself.
Okay, well, I've been in
the
it for
organization's
2
been
years.
around for.
I've been being called a pedophile
I've been out as a boy lover since about 1999.
for a year and a half.
I know.
Okay,
I know.
so
Yeah.
I'm not just
So
some
at a certain
asshole.
point,
Okay, go
no,
ahead.
no, I totally get that, and I really appreciate that we're having this conversation. I think it's amazing. I think well, it is amazing, and
Okay.
but I think I have spoken to dozens, hundreds of other pedophiles, and I do have a sense of what is a good way to begin that conversation. And I think I and those who've done this before me, I think have formed, a sense of what narratives are helpful and what narratives are not helpful. Some narratives come from outside of pedophilia and are going to be, meaningful to those who don't experience it. Some narratives are going to be meaningful to those who do experience it. And I think and by the way, lots of people do approach the forum and stuff like that, and they absolutely own the term disorder, and they feel that it's disordered, and they have no problem with that. But some don't feel that way, and I don't think we're going to engage with those people if we start from that position of saying, we're going to represent this to you in exactly the same way as you've had it represented to you in the outside world. It's just not going to work.
I think
People
you
vote
need
with their
that
feet.
synchronicity with the outside world in
We
order to
we are seeking,
accomplish.
yeah,
In order to
and we're
accomplish
seeking
most,
that, but
you're
there's
gonna
a
give me a
distance.
fucking panic attack.
But there's a difference, and there's a massive distance between, at the moment, how the outside world views us.
Blah. It's an old Jewish joke. Kreplach, giving him a moral panic attack because he sees the Kreplach. The Kreplach, there is no firmament in the Kreplach. If you know the Jewish joke, you understand. Otherwise, it won't make any sense. I'm not going to tell the Jewish joke.
How the outside world views us, and and
I'm
our
so
life
upset.
experience.
I'm so upset by what you're saying.
Either you enjoy neurotic Jewish boys or you don't. I really enjoy them, but I can understand how other people would not. He's upset. What are you going to do? Get him a bagel.
Am I not delivering the script you hoped?
Even just this is not the script I had written in my head. Even the length of your answers is so profoundly upsetting to me.
Okay. Should we
Like
go to some questions?
If pedophilia isn't a disorder, and then what is it? And then if your answer is more than 5 words long, I'm gonna freak out. And it was like
It's a sexuality. It's 3 words, and I'm very happy
it's a
to say that.
sexuality.
Yeah.
Okay. And in response to the charge that if you call it a sexuality, just like being gay or straight, then you're normalizing it. And we can agree that normalize is a stupid word, and I can be more specific. Obviously, what I mean is if you normalize having it as an orientation, then you see a march of, oh, it's not okay for women to wear pants. Oh, now it is okay. Oh, it's not.
Okay, I'm a little bored with Maxie. Let's go back to my script, see if there's anything else I want to mention. So 53, what I said was Cantor's 2018 Include the P tweet is here bearing fruit. Max hears the call to an in-depth discussion of sexual ethics, an attempt to resolve whether P is a legitimate orientation or not, one that can find fulfillment in action or not, and he hearkens to that call and provides the morally informed discussion. Actually, he just screams like a... I mean, he does both. He has morally informed discussion. He also screams out in moral pain. Max veers rapidly back and forth from the finest traditions of Jewish moral inquiry to being a boy who needs to have his mouth scrubbed out with soap to remove the childhood lesbian abuse. Now, he gets real pushy at 112 and says, if I were in charge of your mouth, I would make it say. That is some creepy as hell language. If someone ever used that language to me, I would say, get some sock puppets, put the sock puppets on your hands, and then make the sock puppets say what you want them to say. If you're displeased with Bly, because Bly isn't saying what you wanted him to say, don't tell him, a fellow human being, if I were in charge of your mouth, I would make it say. Like I say, that's a man who needs sock puppets. And then we'll skip ahead to 130. So we're going to see 112 now, I hope.
What do you...
We talked about sort of what a pedophile is and so on. You said earlier on that you didn't agree with the term map, and I just wanted to sort of say a little bit about the fact that, as I think you've pointed out before, there's like pedophilia, there's hebephilia, there's a phebophilia.
Hebephilia, the attraction to Jews. I have it. It's a sickness. I am a sick fuck.
Yeah, I don't like map.
So I think personally, I think the term has just emerged because there is also hebephilia and there's a phebophilia and also nepiophilia.
The joke is that Hebe, with the 2 A's, Hebe is the Greek goddess of beautiful young girl. Always represented as a beautiful young girl by the Greeks. Hebraios is the Greek, or the Latins use it as well, is the term for the Jews. And of course you get hebephilia, the love of Jews from that, where of course they're talking about hebephilia in the terms of loving someone simply because they're, at the beginning of puberty, early adolescent is what we would say in modern talk. So we're building up to the famous comment about if I ran your mouth.
I don't know if I need to gloss those terms, but
no, we got it.
You got it. So
yeah.
So there's a range of things. So there are some people who are not pedophiles, they are hebephiles, but on the other hand, they are in pretty much the same boat as we are. So having a single term that just describes the whole gamut, to me, just saves time and effort, really. I don't think it's an attempt to gloss over the fact that it's, pedophilia or hebephilia or whatever it is. It's just a a neutral term that
whoa. If you're attracted to people who are 15 to 19, for the most part, you can satisfy those desires without breaking the law.
Sure.
If you're attracted to people 5 to 9, you can't. And so combining those, again, this goes to the blurred lines normalization problem. When you start saying like, yeah, well, we'll just give them both the same name. Oh, we'll just call it an orientation. When you start combining, I know that's not the reason. I'm saying this is a reason not to do it. I know that's not why you're... I trust you, Bly. I trust you. And I still trust you. I wouldn't trust you to be my spokesman, but I would, or lawyer, but I trust you that you're a good person with good intentions. And what I'm saying is, it works both ways. So even if it's not your intention to start blurring lines and blending things together, if I were in charge of your mouth, and I'm not, if I were, I would make it say that anything where somebody wants to do something illegal or has an urge to do something illegal or immoral needs to be in a separate category from people who just want to fuck 17-year-olds.
Sure.
Okay, so 130, I unpacked one of my little notions. Again, I have no idea whether they're true or not. I hear the voices in my head and I write them down, you know. I had a notion about Exolancic, who's a famous YouTuber who's been doing very good work. And she got removed from the internet, removed from YouTube at any rate. Now she has her own little private corner of the internet she operates in. So I wanted to compare the dynamic I was observing with Exolancic to the dynamic I was observing here with Maxi. So this is the note that I wrote, which you can follow as best you try to follow as best you can. 1:30, and we'll go back, we'll play the 1:30, 1 hour and 30 minutes point in a second. I'm seeing the same sort of dynamic as I saw with Exolancic. X was posting mockery about the I Am Jazz gender debacle and about people having bad gender surgeries. You know, people with, you know, pus dripping out of their neo-vaginas or their artificial penis falling off or ripping the skin off their thigh or their arm to make the artificial penis. Just horrible stuff. Very low-hanging fruit, but someone needed to satirize it, and Exolancic was satirizing it. Good for Exolancic. She was doing good work, I thought, but then she had a meltdown and got banned. Exolancic was too full of stop castrating them energy. She was also too full of go ahead and castrate them energy. So the stop castrating them energy, I call that the pink energy. You get a lot of that in I Am Jazz. The Mrs. Blushinsky woman, who is a piece of work, is spritzing the pink mist around and saying, oh, castrate Jazz, no problem, take him off, have him castrate. Oh, the greatest thing, have a castration, balls off. Okay, so she's got a lot of pink energy going on. Whereas Mr. Younger, who's saying no to Dr. Ann Georgoulis about the upcoming, if you know, God forbid, but it seems to be the direction which the Dr. Georgoulis parent is heading. Mr. Younger is full of the blue energy, saying don't castrate them. So I call those pink and blue because they're extraordinarily crude forms of energy, very raw, very powerful, and not very well understood. If you study Opus Generis, then you can start talking about them as the Sun Keeper or the Sun Stealer energy, or you can start talking about them as the Cybele Anactus energy, or the Zeus Paidharpagos, or Poseidaon Paidharpagos type energy. But that's terms that are reserved for people who actually know the poetry, and you don't. That's why you're listening to this podcast here. So Exolancic was too full of the blue energy, stopped castrating them, because as a human being, she saw people with their genitals being torn off for no reason. She said, what the hell are you people doing? Which is normal. But of course, Exolancic was also very feminist, and she's also full of the feminist idea that all problems can be traced to men and male behavior can be traced to testosterone. Testosterone can be traced to testicles. Therefore, the situation to all female problems is to castrate all men. This is a reductio ad absurdum of feminist political thought, but it's kind of always there, even though even though the rhetoric is sometimes a little more sophisticated. So that's the she's too human to not be full of stop castrating them energy, which is the blue energy. She's also too feminist to not be full of the pink energy, and let's go ahead and solve all feminist problems by simply castrating all men. Go ahead and castrate them. And she had no way to mediate between those conflicting energies. That's what you would have if you'd studied Opus Generis. What's going on with Max Noy, and I'm calling him Max Noy now because he reminds me of Portnoy from Portnoy's Complaint, which is a story about another little Jewish neurotic boy with difficult to resolve sexual issues, so I call him Max Noy. What's going on with Max Noy, as far as I can tell, is that he's being torn apart between his need to assert his pedo identity, to find, icky coining, pedo bros to share with about how exciting he finds little girls, about how to limit and control that excitement, because, you know, it's not that big a deal. We're pedo bros. We have that. It comes and it goes. No big deal. We don't misconduct ourselves. And how to express it in a civilized way. That's kind of what I was trying to do with Pygmalion and Todd Nickerson as we recite this poetry. It's a very civilized way of talking about how wonderful this statue is, blah, blah, blah. So Max, what's going on with Max Noy is he's trying to find a way to assert his identity as a pedo bro, but he is also subject to massive flows of Hashem, moral energy, the tremendous need to punish people who find little girls sexy. Both of those flows seem to be on the increase, leading to a real felt sense of moral crisis, both within Max Noy himself and happening outside in the Pedo Schwing 2025 world as well. And he has no firm moral structure, no firmament to mediate between them. Hence the moral panic and the "oh God" wailing from Max Noy. Me, I take up the work of making poetry available to help people express their pedo identity in a civilized way. See here my recording of Pygmalion with Todd Nickerson. Todd and I are both celibate. I can't make Max Noy do poetry with me, but I can guarantee you that a Max Noy sat down to record poetry with me would be a happier, saner, more balanced Max Noy. At 1:30, we have the lawyer beating him in the face, which I think is a wonderful manifestation of dad energy. That's the Hashem, clear, simple, not dilating and giving nuances and not camping out on various technical distinctions, but simply threatening to beat Max Noy in the face if he says the wrong thing in the wrong place, which I think is precisely the kind of dad energy that someone raised by lesbians needs. So we're going to go to 1:30, and where Max gets hit, at least in his imagination, by the lawyer. Go.
And then some other lawyers represented me with the school because the ACLU was all that firm that was representing me through the ACLU was also representing the school in another matter. So then for my disciplinary thing with the school, so I had these 4 lawyers who are working for me for free because they believe in free speech, and we're doing cross-examination. I never went to trial. They eventually dropped the charges, but we're doing preparation. Yeah. And so they're cross-examining me. And so the lawyer says, well, why would you say that everybody's thought of shooting people? Why would you say that?
Huh?
And I said, well, I said, well, everybody has, different fantasies about different, things. And it's normal to have different fantasies, and it doesn't mean that you're blah, blah, blah. And my lawyer says, fantasies? If you say that in the courtroom, I am going to punch you in the fucking face.
This is great. This is great. This is Max Noy. This is Max Noy, probably for the only time in his life, getting precisely the kind of male energy to shut down the fantasy process that he needs. Now, if I could send him a care package of le nom du père, that is to say the no of the father, or the law, N-O-M, Greek nomos, le nom du père, I would send him a package of le nom du père because that's what he needs. He needs le nom coming down from père when he is tempted to think about doing this or that or watching cuties for the 4th or 5th time. So let's watch that again, because this is a boy who is calling out for Hashem energy, and it comes to him in the form of a lawyer threatening to punch him in the mouth if he gets up on the witness stand and starts talking about his fantasies.
1920.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, kids of 12, 13 or whatever, younger than that, have access to many of the spaces of the internet. It's not fully policed.
This is your answer. Okay, I keep thinking of. When I was in college, I got arrested for making comments about the Virginia Tech shooter in a class discussion.
Right.
I was saying we should empathize. Obviously, I was saying we should empathize with the shooter. I can empathize with the shooter. Why can't you? You guys are all lying. You're all full of shit. We all know why somebody would shoot up their school.
He's taking us back to about 2007. I was deeply involved with Encyclopedia Dramatica around 2007. Sung Hui Cho was much discussed. We tried to figure out what was going on with that kid. And since all the people involved with Encyclopedia Dramatica were complete losers, we all kind of identified with him. So much so that I'm sort of bonding with Maxie now, because Maxie apparently had a lot of feelings about Sung Hui Cho and identified with him. You're seeing a pretty strong pattern with Max to identify with the shadow and be the dark side. But he does get called up on this. He was arrested and had to get into a legal situation. And the lawyers, bless their legal hearts, they threatened to give him a good one if he talked about his fantasies on the stand. Here we go, second time.
We'll stop lying. That kind of thing. So I get arrested. The ACLU represents me, and then and then some other lawyers represented me with the school because the ACLU was that firm that was representing me through the ACLU was also representing the school in another matter. So then for my disciplinary thing with the school, so I have these 4 lawyers who are working for me for free because they believe in free speech, and we're doing cross-examination. I never went to trial. They eventually dropped the charges, but we're doing preparation. And so they're cross-examining me. And so the lawyer says, well, why would you say that everybody's thought of shooting people? Why would you say that?
Huh?
And I said, well, and I sounded like you. I said, well, everybody has, different fantasies about different, things. And it's normal to have different fantasies, and it doesn't mean that you're blah, blah, blah. And my lawyer says, fantasies? If you say that in the courtroom, I am going to punch you in the fucking face.
So if Maxie didn't get any le nom du père, he didn't get any Torah, he did not get any fathering, elsewhere in his life, he got a full dose from the lawyer that day. 132. Maxie's exasperation, Max Noy's exasperation at the lack of firm moral guidelines from Bly, which he apparently expected a verpeter of all people to give him, reminds me of nothing so much as Olivier's imagery for how to play Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. Larry, Laurence Olivier, imagined himself as an ermine that is a little white weasel, licking a salt block for salt in the frozen north, the salt block placed there by ermine hunters, and getting its tongue stuck frozen to the salt block. Then the hunters come around and collect the ermine easily, presumably ripping them away from the salt blocks and leaving their tongues stuck there. King Oedipus spends the whole play trying to avoid his destiny of being one sexually with his mother. Max Noy makes a 3-hour tragedy out of his efforts to avoid becoming a hostile girl-groping lesbian like his 2 mothers. But of course he's caught by the salt block of cuties, just like the ermine are caught. He does very well to throw his hands in the air and wail to Hashem for mercy and salvation. Now, of the 20 comments I made, Cat Pilon 20 said, "Amen, brother." To that little sermon, I responded, "If you'll forgive me for going Buddhist sermon mode, compassion begins when we realize that we're all ermines trapped by our own self-destructive desire to lick the salt block." So he's going to have a meltdown. We're going to see that at 132. That's what he does. Coming up in 2 minutes.
And the way you answer these questions just keeps making me think of that moment.
Is it because I'm being honest? And
no, it's because you're being circuitous. I said
Maxie is not good at handling moral ambiguity. Bly is very good at dishing out the moral ambiguity that all of our wonderful pet organizations, whether it be Before You Act, Prostasia, Boy Chat, or Verped, are getting better and better at dealing out the pedo slime, the moral ambiguities. But this fellow here is clearly going to be a conduit for a lot of Hashem energy, because he likes his morality black and white.
How do pedophiles manage? How do pedophiles resist looking at CP?
Yeah, and I've told you.
And you're talking about an Indian street child, and then you're talking about 12 and 13-year-olds getting on the internet for the first time. I'm like, well, now the internet's really different. Now 12 and 13-year-olds have access to Pornhub, and just imagine, like, it's not. I'm saying, like, I'm looking for things like yoga.
Okay.
Breathing exercises. Do they masturbate to illustrated child pornography? Is that something that's encouraged or discouraged? Are they encouraged to look at teen porn? Are they encouraged to read the Bible? Like,
he's heading for a big meltdown.
Is there a strategy for this? Or
he's desperate for a morally black and white framework, but he also knows the closer that he gets to that, the closer he's going to be getting to the annihilating wrath of Yahweh. And this is why the person who does the morally unacceptable thing has to be someone else. The person getting punished for the morally unacceptable thing has to be someone else. But at the same time that it has to be someone else, it also has to be Max. And so you're getting this round and round and round thing, which again he's building up to a big one.
Or is it just is it assumed that the real thing is actually different from just the fantasy, and so when confronted with the actual reality of children being abused on film, it's not quite the same. But clearly, it is popular for people. I'm just saying, like, what's the answer to the question? Because the more you you're taking me on the scenic route.
Right. But do you want me to say that there's like a known way of...
No. You just say, I don't know.
There isn't.
They say they can't.
I don't know.
They're pedophiles, Max. What do you fucking expect? They don't resist. I don't know.
Some do, some don't. I mean, I suppose the short answer is some do, some don't. That's and I've told you the way that it happened for me, that I decided I wasn't going to do that anymore. Some people, go down a rabbit hole of that kind of stuff and they never come out again. That does happen. It happens a lot.
How does the community handle? Is it when somebody says, like, is it like I relapsed, or is it like I do my thing and you do your thing? Don't judge me.
No, I think there can be a controversy in the community over that, but fundamentally, in Verpeds, people are trying to quit. They're trying to stop, and so when people, would give advice about that, they would say, they might name the sorts of things that you said, or they might talk about, trying to focus on the negative effects it would have on that person's life and so on. But there isn't a magic bullet. There isn't a single thing that, is always given as advice. What you do is you listen to the person and you find out, like, what's their circumstances, what are the other stresses on them, what are the other things that might be going on in their life that's making them, reach for this material. And so there isn't a single answer. There's a few different organizations that are not run by pedophiles that are, that run helplines and so on. And one of the big issues with those is that people are very afraid of being reported. So it's very difficult to admit to having sort of used that material, because you don't know what how the other person is going to react in terms of it being reported.
When somebody talks about using child sexual abuse material, what is virtuous pedophiles' reaction? Is it like, you shouldn't do that, or is it like,
yes.
Oh, okay, but when to the individual, do you say, hey?
What was that? Let's go back a little bit.
Being reported.
When somebody talks about using child sexual abuse material, what is virtuous pedophiles' reaction? Is it like, you shouldn't do that, or is it like,
yes.
Oh,
I don't know what he's doing with his hand there. I am kind of reminded of Capturing the Freedmans. Capturing the Freedmans was a movie about a Jewish family in Long Island, where the father was pretty cool in the 50s as a band leader, but he kind of deteriorated into an old fuddy-duddy nerd who was teaching kids how to use computers. And he had various sons of his own. But all the kids would come over to his house and they would learn how to use computers 24 at a time. And he got accused of dirty pictures, and they put him away. And a movie was made about this, and there was then later a watch reel where people went back and looked at it, what was going on, and some of the young teenage Jewish boys, who were a few years older than that then at the time of the trial, were discussing what had happened, and one of them, in some spasm of guilt, was gesticulating very much like this about the charged atmosphere of the time and the boys being boys, and the people who were making the watch video, who Capturing the Freedmen several years later, who were making that video, were what is he up to? I didn't tell him to do that. He just started doing like that with his hand and talking like that. The point being that the boys were, as best they could, acknowledging a certain complicity in the whatever sexual processes they were involved in back in the day. And I found that a fascinating moment because, of course, it's subverbal communication. So here he is, Mr. Girl, Mr. Cuties himself, hot and bothered over the question of child. I don't even know what the stupid acronym stands for. In my day, we called it CP, cheese pizza, but now we call it CSAM or CSEM, child sexual abuse material, child sexual entertainment material. I don't know what the hell the acronym stands for, but this is a big issue now. We're now starting to see where Maxie's issues lie.
You don't know what how the other person is going to react in terms of it being reported.
When somebody talks about using child sexual abuse material, what is virtuous pedophiles' reaction? Is it like, you shouldn't do that? Or is it like,
yes.
Oh, okay. But when to the individual, do you say, hey, if you see someone in a forum talking about it, do you say, hey, don't do that? You shouldn't be doing that. And here's how we're going to help you get on the right track, buddy.
Yeah. There is a peer support thing where people will give that opinion and where they will say, that there are dangers to it, that there are reasons not to do it.
Well, no, dangers to it. No.
There are dangers to it. So what we see here is a tormented soul, more or less damned, writhing in moral self-condemnation, which, of course, is the worst kind. And then we have Bly, of course, who's completely oblivious to why he's having such a meltdown and what Max's emotional needs are. Max needs to have a structure saying this is wrong, and then he can say that he's done it and that it's wrong and he feels sorry about it. Then he can get spanked and then he can be, go on with his life. But not having processed the guilt, you see him, poor Maxie, just writhing, and Bly not knowing how to help him.
Is always given as advice. What you do is you listen to the person and you find out, like, what's their circumstances, what are the other stresses on them, what are the other things that might be going on in their life that's making them, reach for this material. And so there isn't a single answer. There's a few different organizations that are not run by pedophiles that are, that run helplines and so on. And one of the big issues with those is that people are very afraid of being reported. So it's very difficult to admit to having sort of used that material because, you don't know how the other person is going to react in terms of it being reported.
When somebody talks about using child sexual abuse material, what is virtuous pedophiles' reaction? Is it like, you shouldn't do that? Or is it like,
yes.
Oh, okay. But when to the individual, do you say, hey, if you see someone in a forum talking about it, do you say, hey, don't do that? You shouldn't be doing that, and here's how we're going to help you get on the right track, buddy.
Yeah, there is a peer support thing where people will give that opinion and where they will say, there are reasons not to do it.
Well, no, dangers to it. No. Dangers to whom? You're saying to the pedophile.
Well.
Okay, but you're saying, but when you say that virtuous pedophiles is telling child porn viewing pedophiles that you shouldn't look at child porn because it's dangerous to you, it brings the word virtuous into question.
We're against it completely, and but the point is, we're not talking to people who need to be told those things.
Max is clearly not impressed by the Verped talking point, however sincerely delivered by Bly.
Things. They know that the children are harmed in the production of it. They know that it's very inhumane. We know this. So so I'm sorry if I sort of skip over that, but and I know it's important, but you're talking to the person who their concern at that moment is, how can I stop with this stuff?
Okay, that's fair. Maybe I'm being.
It's difficult to make it. It's difficult to make an intellectual, public good argument or all those things. That's not what persuade people who are sexually motivated. It's very difficult to make.
So okay. So that's good. I like that. That's good. That's good. You got to tell them why it's going to hurt them.
Yes, because if you are, I think, if you think about also how alienated some people are,
and that hurts you too. Yeah.
Well, they're also just, they may well understand that children are harmed in the production of this stuff, and that it's a extremely toxic sort of.
You're assuming they don't care at that point.
They may be at the point where they just don't really care to live very much. It's not going to be a massive motivator for them. That I
think that is part of the problem with hating or threatening to kill pedophiles, is that if as a society, we're asking pedophiles to not give in to their strong sexual urges.
Okay, Max is a little boring here because I think we've all been in a group with people who talk about wanting to give up porn and they never actually do anything any differently, and then they come in and they're guilty about their porn and their porn use, and you say, well, what are you going to do differently this week? And they make a commitment to do something differently that week. You know, the net nanny software or whatever it might be, or to working out more, taking cold showers, whatever idiotic plan of action they launch into. And then you talk to them next week. Well, did you do anything different? Are you still struggling with more? Yeah, same exact thing. It just really gets tedious. So I talk about poetry. I don't talk about porn. I don't find porn interesting. I should clarify that. I find porn fascinating. I find men complaining about their porn addiction. I find men complaining about their porn addiction very boring. So 147, it dawns slowly, but it does dawn on Maxnoy that bringing people together to indulge their most shameful desires is not something where we can have debates about whether it's wise, but is rather the essential central dynamic of the internet. Hence Minor's law, all internet content aspires to the condition of porn, all porn aspires to the condition of child porn, therefore all internet content aspires to the condition of child porn. Let's see what inspired that remark at 147.
And who are seeking sort of, friends. There might be people who are seeking guidance on other aspects of their life, like how might I come out to somebody in my life? Is there a way that I can talk to my family about this?
Yeah.
That's often discussed. People
Okay.
might be in there's a diversity of situations. It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
just
yeah. I
like,
hear you.
we're not saying you've got pedophilia. We're now going to
I
work
guess
on
my
your
concern
pedophilia.
is, and I think other people's concerns may be in hearing about just the organization without knowing anything about it. Is it wise to get a bunch of pedophiles anonymous and on the internet together in a
I don't want to be mean to Max. He's admitted that he's only been thinking about this issue for 2 years, but this has got to be the dumbest thing ever. Anybody who studied the dynamics of the internet at all is aware that the more shameful and the more exciting the internet content is, the more it draws you into the internet and makes you unfit for civilized life outside of the internet. And so, frankly, as I express in Minor's Law, pedophilia is the engine driving the internet. So, is it wise? That's just like so stupid and so naive. Let's hear him say that again because it's so stupid.
Structure is peer support, and
So
it's a chance
yeah.
to speak about sort of what the experiences are, and for other people to say, yes, I have had that experience too.
Okay, so it's
Yes,
it's
I
top down
understand.
in that you vet people and then let them in. And that
Yeah,
part is top down, and then once they're in, it's peer support.
it's peer support. Yeah, at that
Okay,
point.
somebody's offered me $100 to end the call. Fuck off. Fuck you. That's a no. But they also gave me $5 at the time they said that, so thank you for the donation. But no, you can't control my content with money. Yes, and somebody's asking for 12 steps, but it sounds like you're saying 12 steps is a little too top down.
Partly because it's a diverse population. I suppose if you're talking about sort of Alcoholics Anonymous or things like that, everybody's presenting with with at least a very similar problem. In our case, people aren't necessarily presenting with one single problem. There might be people who've got an issue with child sexual abuse material or CP. There might be people who don't have that and who are seeking sort of, friends. There might be people who are seeking guidance on other aspects of their life, like how might I come out to somebody in my life? Is there a way that I can talk to my family about this?
Yeah.
That's often discussed. People
Okay.
might be in there's a diversity of situations. It's
Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
just
I
like,
hear you.
we're not saying you've got pedophilia. We're now going to
I
work
guess
on your pedophilia.
my concern is, and I think other people's concerns may be in hearing about just the organization without knowing anything about it. Is it wise to get a bunch of pedophiles anonymous and on the internet together in a peer-to-peer forum? And
Max, the internet it's a series of tubes for connecting pedophiles to porn and to children. That's what the internet is. You need to understand that, or you're not going to have a good time in the 21st century.
Why is the question?
Well, you can imagine that it could appear
Yes.
to be a place for people to encourage each other to abuse child porn, or to share it,
Sure.
or to seek it out, or
Yeah.
to have titillating conversations. Not that titillating conversations are inherently a bad idea, but just that it's.
We don't really approve of. We don't really encourage that, and we
Well,
actually
yeah,
have
I'm sure you don't, but I'm just saying.
Uh,
I just wanted to put an aside that I don't necessarily. I'm not condemning that by itself. I'm just saying it could paint a picture of people kind of like.
Would it help if I spoke about our rules that we have on the forum?
No, Bly, it would not. It would not help Max at all to talk about rules. He needs moral condemnation. He needs it hard. He needs it in the seat of his pants. Is what he needs. All right. What other comments did I know? We're winding down here. We gotta keep moving. Are the DMs policed? That's a retarded thing to say. Summary of the whole thing: the real thrills of pedoproximity, because we're talking about organizations like Prostasia, which are so evidently pedoproximate. The real thrills of pedoproximity, dolls, drawings, loli shota, etc., are to be found over at Prostasia. Watch this sum closely: 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/16. None of those partial sums is the number 1, but clearly they all add up to exactly 1 if you take the limit of the infinite series. Similarly, none of the substitutes proffered by Prostasia are pedophilia, considered individually, but it's equally clear that taken together, they all add up to exactly pedophilia, no more, no less. And that's who Prostasia is and what Prostasia does. And we'll get a quote from Jeremy Malcolm, who's completely irrelevant, at the end of this. Okay, conclusion. 2 hours and 13 minutes into this, I found the need to say yes. Max gets full marks for recognizing the need for this conversation and having pedophiles on. I kept hoping Voice of Reason would go in this direction, but absolutely not. Benjamin Boyce, number one, he's obviously fascinated by pre-operational trannies, full-blown trannies, and post regret phase trannies, and also he works as a school bus driver. So there's not a chance in hell he'll ever take up this topic. That's reserved for professionals in classical poetry like me. So to wind up with Maxie, who continues to suffer and is imposing that suffering on his guests by making more videos of this nature, I did want to share the Jeremy Malcolm quote. This morning, the ever-irrelevant Jeremy Malcolm felt inspired to put down his Prostasia dolly, beam in from Prostasia land, and opine on the Max Karson Bly Rede interview. Jeremy Malcolm: I think the problem with this video is that you expected the MAP community to be contrite and self-hating, and many of them are, but you can't expect a peer support group to present itself that way and attract members in need. You have to get that Jeremy whine. In need. For a pedophile group to seek positive PR from normies, teleophiles, i.e. non-pedophile, is a fool's errand. Even if it were possible, it is not more important than the group's primary peer support objectives. Calling themselves sick fucks or stressing that they are mentally disordered will not help them to build self-esteem and inculcate anti-abuse attitudes. It won't help save the lives of our young members who are dying by suicide at a high rate. It's not progressive for outsiders to explain to members of a minority group how they should engage in discourse. You are norm-explaining pedophilia to pedophiles in this video. Neither of you comes off too well, but Bly comes off better. Thank you, Jeremy Malcolm. A man with no skin in the game, and yet a lot to say. Again, not a map, Jeremy Malcolm. Not a map. Okay. So, feeling the need for a pee break, and you're not allowed to watch. So we're going to take a break for a second. I'll be right back. And then we're going to talk about the TransCat, who's mad at me. Then we're going to talk about Sick Rose, and then we'll launch into the real festivities of the evening, which will be reciting Karen Davis. You're kidding, right? I wish I could take a block of walnut and just carve a Karen Davis face in walnut to go with the rest of her walnut furniture. That's my name for Karen Davis. Be right back. Okay, so here we go. We're going to remove the loathsome visage of Max. We do that page minus. Yes. I fucked that up completely. Yes, now I have to bring back the camera. Plus video capture device. Okay. Yes. And we embiggen it. I will now, horror of horrors, flip over to the live chat, live streaming section and see if anyone has the least interest in what I'm saying. I certainly hope not. I'm an elderly, ill-tempered curmudgeon and will only be cruel to people who make the mistake of signing on the assumption that they're going to be making idiotic, snarky comments on my video anyways. Let's see what's going on over there. My channel, your channel. VirtueCast number 4 is streaming live. It's a little bit behind the actual feed, about 4 seconds behind the actual feed. On a person called Haley Helmholtz, snarky comments on my video anyways. Let's see what's going on over there. A person called Haley Helmholtz has signed up. My channel. I will say, hello, Haley. Your channel. Homely. Hello, Haley Helmholtz. This is human interaction. God knows I'm not good at it. I'll give it a shot for about 30 seconds. There. I did it. Hello, Haley Helmholtz. Thanks for making snark on my video. Okay, human interaction issues completely resolved. Let us resume our content. Oh, let me check Boy Chat and see if anybody's put any snark up at Boy Chat. Nope, no interaction at all at Boy Chat. So I have 4 comments here from one Haley Helmholtz who says, check the DSM-5, page 698. It says pedophilia is not always a disorder. Well, as happy as that would make my fellow posters at Boy Chat, that's not going to cheer up our poor sad Max at all, because he wants it to always be a disorder. So, sorry about that, Max. Haley Helmholtz makes a second comment. Again, on page 698, it says pedophilia can be a sexual orientation. You can read the DSM-5 online. Well, now, is that a firmament? If you know anything about gay history, which I lived through a little bit of it in the 70s and 80s, and I've been posting some various historical materials at Boy Chat to try to sharpen up the minds of the young activists who gravitate to BC. There really is nothing easier to manipulate than the boards of people who make decisions for all the psychiatrists in the country. You just go to a few meetings and slap them around a little bit, zap them, make fun of them, have some testimonies, and then they change their tune and start whispering out of the other side of their mouth, and that's all there is to it. This is not the firmament that a man like Max is going to need, because it's not firm. You see, it can't be a firmament if it's not firm, and that's what you're not getting with these definitions and the back and forth and the splitting of hairs and the pedophilia, hebephilia, epipedohebephilia, whatever the hell it is. It's absolute nonsense, and it's not going to be the firm no that Max needs. Haley Helmholtz trying to get historical with me. In biblical times, girls got married at 12 years old. How are you not going to mention Muhammad as well? There is no age of consent in the Bible. Okay. Sometimes I just have to stop and breathe. If you're going to have a biblical discourse about pederasty, you are probably not going to want to bring in concepts like age of consent. That comes many centuries later. There are many things to say about the holy boys and holy girls in the Bible texts, but the age of consent concept does not belong in that discussion. That's all I'm going to be able to say on that issue. Keep reading, Haley. You're obviously a passionate person. Let's see. Does Haley have any content? This is me with no followers having a conversation with a person who probably only has 2 or 3 followers and no content. But then you never know. Haley could turn out to be un personnage de grand import. Grand import, I should say. Okay, Haley is not coming up. Well, let's just type it in and see if anything comes up. Okay, sounds like Haley Helmholtz is reposting a lot of material from featuring our friend Max. And let's see what else. Why Shoe on Head is clueless about maps. So you've been called a degenerate. Stop judging age gap relationships. Turned on by cartoon character. And then Amate Cantor interview, is pedophilia a sexual orientation? Child sex dolls, good or bad? Lolicon and child sex dolls, good or bad? Feminist lies of family rape culture. 66 subscribers. So I'm talking to the kind of person, I should wear my fine clothes and show up on Sunday to talk to Haley Helmholtz, who has 66 subscribers compared to, I'd be lucky to have 12 or 13. So this is the world of discussion of these issues. Let's see what stop judging age gap relationships sounds like.
Stop judging age gap relationships. I'm Brian, and my husband is almost 22 years older than me. I've always preferred the company of older men, and I've always felt...
When did you meet him? Are we talking full-on Christopher Isherwood here? What are we talking?
...the stigma toward relationships like mine. Age gap relationships are more common than you think. There's Beyonce and Jay-Z, George and Amal Clooney, and Jason Momoa and Lisa Bonet. Much of the ridicule is directed at older men who date significantly younger women, such as Leonardo DiCaprio and his many 20-something girlfriends. Another May-December relationship that raised eyebrows is Dennis Quaid and his 26-year-old partner, Laura Savoy. Plenty of people have questioned its legitimacy, despite seemingly knowing very little about it. And it's not just celebrities. 9% of US heterosexual married couples are in age gap relationships, where either the husband or the wife is 10 or more years older than their spouse. That might not seem like a lot, but in a country as big as the US, that's millions of people. And that doesn't account for same-sex relationships like mine. Studies have tried to understand why people
We're not seeing the older partner. That's a deliberate choice.
are so judgmental. One from 2006 showed that people in more traditional pairings have a negative perception of ones that are less traditional. Another study from 2018 said that people may look down on age gap relationships because they think they're illegitimate, that someone's being exploited, or that it's purely transactional. Age gap relationships where the woman is older have been viewed as even more problematic. All of that explains why people have been so openly critical of Quaid and Savoy. But as someone in a similar kind of relationship, I find it frustrating that people pass such judgment on consenting adults without offering a shred of evidence that something untoward